Hello and welcome back to the Live Rally Game Podcast. My name is Steven, and if you're joining us early in the morning in America or you're late in the evening in Australia, get excited because today we have the deep dive with the winner of Surviving Reelfoot, the Decennium, Matty P. Matty, how are you?
Steven, I'm wrapped. I'm super chuffed to be here, and I couldn't be more excited to get into the deep dive with you.
Has the fact that you won sunk in yet, or are you still processing like I did this?
Definitely still processing. I think coming immediately out of the game, I think I was in shock for about 4 or 5 or 6 days. And then I got back to Australia and I'm trying to reflect on memories from the game, and everything just is quite blurry. And I think I'm shocked at how much my memory was actually impacted over the course of the 8 days. It went really quickly, and I think it's starting to sink in now.
Well, so what's interesting is, at least my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, of the Australian live rally game scene, a lot of the games are on the shorter side, like 1 to 3 days maybe. And then you just did Reelfoot, which is a full 8 days. Are you advocating now, like, hey, we need to have some longer games here? Like,
I would love to see it. I think the Australian community is really strong, and we have some incredible players. We have some incredible prod crews that run the games all over the country. And I think there's absolutely potential to do that. And seeing how effective it was in Reelfoot doing a longer game, I think there will definitely be an appetite for that, I think, amongst players and even the production crews.
Well, I've heard amazing things about the Backyard Survivor production crew, and I think I heard some rumors of what the size of the production crew was for their most recent season, which I'm excited for when it appears on YouTube. And we'll talk more about production crews because you mentioned in your final tribal council speech your kind of your preparation. I'm curious, when you were in the season, you're voted out, you kind of revolving door, you come back in the game. At what point did it sink in, like, I have a fighting shot to take this victory?
Reflecting on that, when I got voted out, that was an absolute blindside. Like, I was convinced I had Trinica on board and Ethan in that moment in the game. So I went back and actually watched that tribal council just to relive that moment. And I looked at myself and I was genuinely shocked. And I guess going to Redemption, challenges are not my forte. Like, here in Australia, I've played one live game that was filmed, that's Sydney Survivor, and I've also played a mini in Melbourne that was about 2.5 years ago. That was my first ever live game experience. I also played an unrecorded game that was in the country about 18 months ago, and I thought I was in a pretty good position in most of those games. And the mini that I first played was the one where I made Final Tribal Council and got 0 votes, and hence my wanting to play this and making the end, and in my mini video saying I really want to just get redemption for myself, like, and not do such a terrible performance at Final Tribal. But yeah, so the whole redemption aspect, I wasn't expecting that to be an element in Reelfoot. So it was a very pleasant surprise, especially because my game would have been over, I think, was it day 4 or day 5, based on when I was voted.
Day 5.
But when I got back in, I was not confident at all. And I remember having a conversation with Ethan, who's also from Australia. And it was hilarious because it was the day after we merged. And I think I said something along the lines of, insert some curse words here, but what the heck are we doing here? Like, these players are on another level. And we were both just like gobsmacked at the quality of the players we were up against. And at the merge, I definitely did not believe I could win. And I can speak to this a little bit later, but it was actually that chat with Melissa where she really kind of got behind me and said, look, you can win this. And I mentioned that in my final tribal pitch. And I think that was a big turning point for me in the game, and going from not believing to, suddenly believing that I could win.
Well, I will admit, I never won Reelfoot. I went on 7th with an idol in my pocket. So in order to help really understand what it means to win Reelfoot, it takes a winner to help out with that. So I am calling in the winner of Season 9 of Reelfoot, Bluff Ranch, Justin, to help me kick off this interview with some questions. Welcome, Justin.
Amazing.
Hey, Matty P. Big fan. Huge Matty P fan. Yeah, Steven, thank you for letting me jump in. I had burning questions that I had to ask Matty P, being the other kind of exile winner coming in. There's so many things that people just don't understand unless they've lived through that. And I was like, I gotta ask some questions. So I appreciate you letting me jump on, Stephen.
Yeah, Maddie. So one of the reasons why I thought Justin would be great here because he won Survivor like you, but your season parallels season 9 of Reelfoot a lot, where Justin also was voted out right before the merge, re-entered the game, and then ended up winning the game. So I thought he would have some unique insight and questions to ask you.
Yeah. So my first big question, Maddie, is so I got idled out, so it was a little bit different. I guess my first question, and I think you kind of maybe knew it was coming to some degree, but when you were out, but my initial reaction when I was out was like, screw these people. I hate everyone. And I actually wasn't sure if I even wanted to go to Redemption. Now, it's a little different in our season because we didn't know about Redemption until we got voted off right away. But you all knew, right? Like you all knew ahead of time. Is that right?
Yes, we found out at the beginning of the game. I think it was day 1 in the afternoon when they said this was going to be an element of this game, which I wasn't expecting.
Right. And was there ever a thought like throughout the game pre-elimination that you were like, well, if I get voted out, I'll definitely do that, or I don't know that I will? Like, did you contemplate that kind of thought process of like if you'd even want to go to Redemption or not? Because we did see some players just opt to not go back in.
Yes, to answer that question, I remember thinking within my own mind on day 1 or day 2, the conditions were awful. The conditions were truly horrific on that first and second day. I got 0 sleep on night 1. I think 80 to 90% of the players were also in the same boat. They also didn't get any sleep. And I remember thinking on day 2, I'm like, if I get voted out, it's okay. I don't have to do Redemption. And it was like kind of the self-doubt creeping in again. And yeah, I was sitting on the fence, but then I think once I got through that really tough initial phase with the conditions, with self-doubt, I was experiencing a world of gastrointestinal distress early in the game as well, which was also something I was battling. Not so privately because, I managed to talk to everybody about it in the game. But I think after day 3, I was like, I was absolutely going to give it a crack. Whether I would be successful in the Redemption Challenge, I wasn't so confident. I think I would have had to have tried. I didn't fly all the way to the Northern Hemisphere to not try.
Yeah. And I think it is a little different for you, right? Because you came so much further, right, than I did. So yeah, that's really interesting. And similarly, I've played 6 games. I've never won an individual immunity challenge in my entire LRG career. So I was very similar in that, like, hey, I know like challenges aren't necessarily my bread and butter. Like I'm okay, but I just don't know if I could beat these other people. So I guess, was there any, you probably didn't have that much time, right? You were kind of voted out and came back in right away. Is that right?
It was fairly quick. I remember going to Redemption, seeing the camp, and then production were like, you've got an hour, that's all. And then we're going to the challenge. So people were like packing up Redemption as I arrived. Shortly after I arrived, and didn't really have much time to kind of suss out what was going on.
Yeah, that was kind of my next question is how did you, I had about an hour too, and all I do was get in a fight with Frank. So I was curious if you used that hour at all to try to gather any information, because obviously everybody else there has been talking about everything going on. What was that hour like, and did you try to leverage it in any way?
Thinking back to that hour, I recall a lot of questions coming my way around what happened. How did you end up getting voted out? I don't really recall fishing for information or trying to seek out information myself. If anything, it was probably what the heck happened on the swapped pink tribe. Like, how did Shauna get voted out? What happened with Blake? That was probably my initial kind of questions. But after I had those answered, I was just trying to get back in the zone mentally, because I thought I've got less than an hour to dial in and not get too distracted with everything else that's going on, because if I don't get past that challenge, my game's over. So I thought I can deal with the information fact finding later. I was just purely trying to get in the zone.
Yeah. I think I jumped right on as I was hearing you talk about, kind of being uncertain about if you even had a chance to win going back in, right? And that was all I was thinking about. It's like, even if I get back in, like, do I even have a shot? Is it even worth it? Am I going to get to the end and no one's going to respect it because I was voted out? And I feel like, I don't know the timeline, and I should have looked it up before that, but I feel like it was right around the time of Chris Underwood's like Edge of Extinction win. Maybe it was a couple years later, but I still feel like there was so much just like anger around like exile winners coming in, or exile people coming back in and winning, that I was like, I'm dead in the water. Like, I just don't have a shot. And I think you were saying you kind of felt that way coming back in as well.
Yeah, I was expecting Shauna and I to go first and second in terms of the tribal councils straight after the battle back. And like, I wasn't confident at all. And I think that conversation with Ethan the next morning around like, what am I doing here? Like, I felt like I hadn't made it, like enough impact coming into the merge to really be in a position to win. But it's amazing. Like, I think just one conversation can change everything, and that was what happened in my case. So a couple of conversations.
Yeah. Steven, are you getting a little bit of weirdness on Maddie's mic? Yeah, I was too. I heard most of it, but it was a little clunky for a second.
Australian Wi-Fi. That's all I've got to say.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think you talked about that conversation with Melissa, and neither of you had immunity coming back in, right? Because that was a little bit different on my season. Both Lydia and I had immunity, I think, that first tribal council when we got back in, but you didn't have that. Is that right?
No. So I think Shauna had an advantage that went with her when she was voted out. And then we also got 8 fire tokens each, which I kept a big secret and stuffed in a pair of socks that I had in my bag.
Nice. Yeah, I just happened to immediately in the next immunity challenge, I found an immunity idol. So I had that in my back pocket, and I think I let just enough of the right people know to like keep me safe that first round. But it was funny, like coming back in, I wasn't sure if the people I was working with would want to work with me. Like, would they still welcome me back? Or, you know, would I kind of be the outcast? But luckily, like, I found people pretty quickly, and it seemed like you found some folks pretty quickly. Like, what was your strategy going back in terms of like who to talk to? Like, who did you think your best chance was to kind of scoop back up quickly?
Look, I think initially, how's the audio just next? I'm seeing the comments Robo Mash.
Yeah, it's still a little rough.
Okay, let me try muting and any better now?
Still somewhat staticky.
Yeah.
We love tech. Let me try something real quick.
Might need to jump out and jump back in.
Yeah, is that any better?
Oh, that's much better.
That's perfect.
Yeah, I just switched mics, so look at me go.
There you go.
So were you actually talking? Sorry, I got a bit distracted.
Yeah. No, so I was just asking, like, what was your strategy coming back in? Like, who were your first go-tos to talk to try to kind of figure out who your people were at that point?
Yeah, excellent question. So Shauna, number one. So she was kind of my ride or die, and I established that within about the first hour of the game. I was locked and loaded with her. I felt this mutual kind of loyalty, and she did share that she, well, can you still hear me?
I can hear you, but you've now frozen.
Oh, the joys. So what are you seeing on your end?
You're just
very you're good to keep talking, and hopefully the video will catch up.
Okay. So yeah, Shauna was my number one, went straight to her. Obviously had relationships with Sandra as well, and then Kiri from the pre-swap. And then kind of coming into that was Hannah, who I think had flipped from her original Green Alliance. And like, I think I wasn't trying to rock the boat. I wanted to try and stay as under the radar as possible, just to ensure that I wasn't going to be that first in those first couple of boots following the merge.
Nice. And my last question, maybe, is getting you get to that final tribal, right? And I was trying to figure out how much I wanted to address coming back from exile and how much I just kind of wanted to avoid that altogether in case people were bitter about it. Did that go through your thought process of kind of what to say at the end. Like, how much do I talk about that versus how much do I just kind of like, if I get asked about it, great, but I'm not going to like bring it up as a thing.
It's really interesting you say that, because it's something I wanted to keep a lid on and not have people consciously thinking about.
Right.
Because I think Shauna going first definitely opened the game up for me, because she was definitely a big player. She was a winner of a previous live game in the US. She had social connections almost across everybody in the game. And by her leaving quickly and being the battleback person sent, I was able to kind of slide under the radar. And then we went into that kind of 5-5 situation where I was a swing vote for the next tribal. And I think that was when I could see that the people I was working with were keen to kind of continue moving forward with that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I watched most of Final Tribal. I don't think I watched the whole thing.
What were your thoughts?
Jumping around. I mean, I thought you did brilliant, but I don't remember it coming up too much. Like, I don't remember Exile being as big of a topic of conversation. I'm not sure if that's because you all knew about it from the beginning, so it wasn't a shock. Everyone kind of knew it was an element of the game, where on my season, we didn't know about it until it happened. It was a big shock to everybody, and I think there was a little resentment, or kind of, I don't know if it was resentment, but I think it certainly was an element people weren't expecting, so I think it was a little bit more taboo in my season to have an Exile winner get there. But did it come up at all in a big way for you at Final Tribal? Just in case I missed it, I don't remember it coming up too much.
No, I think it only came up at a point where I had to differentiate my game from Sandra and Charlie's game as a result of one of the questions I got from one of the jury members. I can't remember who asked it, but I basically kind of fleshed it out a little bit more, and I said this was what I had to do to get back in. I said my whole game depended on that little sandbag at the end of the block on the plank, and I used that to try and gain a little bit of credibility in terms of the physical side of the game, and like my focus and how badly I wanted to be there. And I think that probably demonstrated it best. But it's interesting, Justin, because it wasn't really a big topic of conversation at all.
Yeah.
And I think, if anything, in the game, it was seen more as a negative, which is why I think people were happy to kind of continue with me all the way to the end. Right.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised that Sandra and Charlie didn't jump right on that of like, dude, this guy was voted out, right? Like he was out of the game. We played the whole game. We were here the whole time, whatever they wanted to do it. I was a little surprised they didn't attack you more on that level. So yeah, I thought that was really interesting. Well, I just want to say congratulations. I think I had a comment about halfway through where I was like, I think he might be my winner pick. I think he's going to sail through, even though I was a little like sad that there's going to be another Battleback winner if that happened. But I will officially pass my crown on to you as the reigning Battleback champion.
We're starting a trend, Justin. Let's just keep our eyes out for next year. It might be 3 people.
That's right. We're going to normalize Battleback winners, which I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing for future LRPs. But yeah, it was a pleasure to say hi, Stephen. Thank you so much for letting me jump in for a few minutes. But I'll let you guys get on with your chat. I just wanted to say congrats and hello. And yeah, we hope to see you back in the States for games in the future.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Justin. Awesome to meet you.
Thank you, Justin.
Thanks.
Has Matt come back?
Matt was back and has now left again. So you sound good on my end once more.
I'll keep my eyes on the comments. Thanks for that.
Sam Green has us covered with the robot alert. So thank you, Sam.
Sam's in Queensland. He's the host of Brisbane Survivor.
Okay, awesome. So we've with Justin here, we kind of talked a lot about the kind of mid-end game, but I want to go back in time to your application of Surviving Reelfoot. So you played Survivor Sunday, you played a couple of other games. How did you discover Surviving Reelfoot?
I remember speaking with somebody on Instagram who had played Survival Challenge. I don't know how we ended up following each other. I think I may have had a few wines on a Friday night, which is generally how I end up connecting with random people online. And we got chatting and I said, what are the kind of biggest and best games in the US? And this particular person said, Surviving Reelfoot is 8 days. You're not going to get a longer game than that. And I was like, I want that. Like that's what I want. And so I looked at the application window. It fit kind of the timelines when I would have been able to travel, because obviously being in the middle of winter here in Australia right now, it worked. From a work perspective, I was able to get the time off of the vacation time off of work. And their application process, like to Reelfoot's credit, they opened it up a long time before the game actually started. And that was a big driver in me wanting to do Reelfoot, because I needed a big period of time where I could kind of sit and think and prepare for the game. But it was the duration of the game, and I think it was the similarities to actual Survivor, where I would never be able to find that anywhere else in the world outside of Reelfoot.
So you apply to Surviving Reelfoot, you get cast. Talk to me about everything you do to prepare for coming to play Surviving Reelfoot.
So in preparation, I think I was known in Sydney Survivor as somebody who had big reactions, and
your mic has gone staticky again.
All the good moments. Hold up, let me just try to change this again. Is that any better?
That is better.
Okay. Where were we?
So you're talking about in Sydney Survivor, you were known as.
Oh yeah, big reactions, always surprised, which is kind of similar to the way I play in Reelfoot. Like I have a childlike personality. I feel that like I'm from the country in Australia. A lot of things still shock me, even though I'm now in my 5th decade of life. And I think, yeah, in preparation, I was like, okay, how do I maximize this? How do I turn myself into a character? How do I make this part of my brand? And so I made a very tough choice to abstain from cosmetic Botox for 7 months in preparation for this very important moment in my life, and just so I can emote to my full potential, to give the players and the fans what they want and what they expect from Matty P. And I also remember marinating myself in fake tan for the 2 nights prior to the game, and you can probably see I'm a little bit of a shade of orange at the moment. And I remember giving my first confessional in Reelfoot, and I was like, look at this hand. This is a fake tan disaster. I said, if I don't win, I want to be remembered. And if this is how I'm remembered, I don't care. So I wanted to be that like big fake tan, tall man running around who can actually emote. So 50K, Justin, not in my 50s.
I think the wiki, you're 40, right?
41 yesterday.
Okay, well, happy on birthday.
Thank you so much.
So, in addition to abstaining from Botox and making sure the correct tan, you mentioned your final tribal council. You also go and you assist and help out with a lot of different games. What games were you out in production with?
So that was this was a really interesting element, because I view myself as a fairly new-ish live game player and also fan, because I only started watching Survivor in 2019, just before the pandemic. And so I've always had this kind of view, and it's kind of my mantra in life, that I'm always learning. Like I never ever stop learning. And I obviously had the opportunity to play the live day game in Sydney, but after that, it's really tough in Australia to get cast again for a second opportunity. So it's a real privilege if you manage to get cast twice. And because I didn't have that opportunity, I thought, well, I want to give back to the community. And so I volunteered as production crew for Melbourne Survivor 4, Canberra Survivor 4, and you mentioned earlier Backyard Survivor. I was planning on potentially crewing, but it's an expensive flight from here to Perth. But once I knew I was cast in Reelfoot, I thought I really want to lean into this. I want to see, selfishly, I really want to see the big scale production, and it's amazing production over there. And the community they've kind of formed and cultivated is really special as well. It's very separate to the East Coast games, where there's probably a bit more overlap in the people that play and the production crew. It's almost its own little entity, which is it's really unique and great. And I was privileged enough to crew that game in March of this year, and I'm sworn to secrecy, but you will not be disappointed when that comes out. It was one of the most epic games I've ever had the privilege of watching in my life. And yeah, I think I viewed each of the production crew opportunities as a means of me learning. And so I was kind of like, for the majority of time, I was filming players do their confessionals, filming the strat, and I was just always thinking in my head, I'm like, what would I do if I was in this situation? How would I behave differently if I was this player and they know they're going home? Would I do the same thing? Or like, you learn so much from being part of prod, and anyone who's watching who hasn't, I couldn't highly recommend it enough. I learn more through volunteering as crew than I probably do playing.
Any main takeaways from those experiences that helped you in Reelfoot?
I'm trying to think of I think it's just knowing that my style of play is okay. And it's like, because I think there was a lot of self-doubt in the beginning when I first played, and I did as well as I did in Sydney. I probably thought I didn't have much business finishing 6th in that game, when the cast in that game were elite. Like, it was probably one of the best casts that I've ever seen in a live game until Reelfoot 12. So I've been really privileged to play in 2 games where the cast have just been stellar. And I think just watching the other games helped build my confidence, because that's always been probably one of the things that I've battled with the most.
Did you have a strategy in mind for when you came to Reelfoot, like when you hit the ground, or were you going to figure out things kind of minute by minute?
Yeah, so my strategy coming in, I mentioned this briefly in my Meet Me video. I'm a big believer in kind of perception, and being such a big person, like I'm 6'5", I can't blend in terms of my physical appearance, but I am a big believer in, I didn't want to work with anyone who was male identifying, or equally as tall, because I think just from a visual perspective, it looks like it can be a big threat. So I was like, I want to work.
So we'll never be in alliance, is what I'm hearing, because I'm also 6'5".
Oh, no way. Oh, my goodness. Well, maybe. Look, never say never, because people will probably be looking for that now if I ever choose to play again. But yeah, that was just my thought process coming in. I thought I want to work with someone with a different gender identity, who kind of looks different, and someone who is a good social player that I can trust. And I was really lucky in the first hour of the game. I kind of had a conversation with Shauna. We got to game chat quite quickly from what I can recall. And she said she didn't have a ride or die in the previous game that she had won. And I said, let me be that person. And that was kind of it. We just signed, sealed, delivered. We're like, I'll have your back, you'll have my back. We split, and we were together for the entire duration of both of our games. To the best of my knowledge, she may have something different to say, but that's how I felt.
So when you're coming to Reelfoot, have you ever been to the United States before?
Yes. So I lived there in 2011 and 2014.
Okay.
And I've been there probably every 3 years since then.
Okay. So did you fly straight in the game, or did you give yourself any time to kind of work out any jet lag?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I originally had planned to come in a week prior, because I was terrified of the heat. Like, I was looking at the conditions. This is why I live in Melbourne. It's one of the coldest capital city in Australia. It's, I kind of fade away in the heat. I lose the will to live. And I was really nervous, and I thought I need to acclimatize, otherwise I could be done on day one. And I found out in April that I was actually getting laid off from the job that I had. And I thought, yikes, I can't afford to come in a week earlier. So I actually pushed that back to fly out on the 5th of June. So I landed on the 5th, got picked up 2 days later to go to Union City, which is near the site. And then, so I had minimal physical kind of preparation coming into the conditions, and probably minimal jet lag kind of adjustment as well. But that ended up probably working in my favor, because I was really tired going into the game. And although I didn't get any sleep on the first night, I did sleep pretty well on night 2, from what I recall. I thought it was night 3, but going back and making some notes, I did sleep quite well. And yeah, I think everyone could tell, because apparently I'm a very loud snorer.
What were your expectations coming into Reelfoot?
Okay, Stephen, I didn't realize how I managed to deal so well with the conditions in the game until I had a conversation with Ethan a couple of days ago because it was one of the first times we properly connected post game. And I was saying to him, like, I think I did okay because I was expecting the absolute worst. You could see the anxiety in my Meet Me video where I was talking about the rattlesnakes, the ticks, like all of the bugs. I was like, yuck, like I'm the biggest hypochondriac ever. But I think expecting the worst coming in and then seeing other people struggle as much, maybe if not more, I really relaxed into the game. I'm probably on day 2. I was like, I can do this. And what was your original question? Sorry, Stephen, around
what were your expectations coming into Reelfoot?
Yeah, I expected minimal to no sleep at all because I'm a raging insomniac at the best of times. And getting through day 1 with no sleep, playing day 2, I thought, no, okay, this is all right. Managed to get some sleep. I'm like, okay, I'm already exceeding my own expectations.
A majority of players playing Reelfoot are traveling domestically. For you, you're traveling internationally, and getting from Australia to the United States is not a small feat, right? And there's a risk when you're playing these games. Like, you may be first out, you may be the winner. Were you mentally preparing yourself for the off chance that the game was shorter than expected for you?
Absolutely. And I think that's something that production did a really good job with in managing our expectations as players, because my understanding was, and I was fully prepared to be the first boot if that were the case, because I thought I can't get in my head and think, oh, I'm only going to be happy with this trip if I like make it through 2 or 3 or 4, however many tribal councils. I was fully mentally prepared that if I was first boot, I still got a great experience. And that's the beautiful thing about Reelfoot, is that no one goes home until day 3. And then this particular game, not knowing we were going to have battle back, but to see a success story like Debbie, who came in, unfortunately was voted out first, but then absolutely maximized that opportunity that she had and had the best time at Redemption, and ended up getting, I think, almost 5 full days of the experience out of 8. Like, that's really, really special. And I think that was probably one of the real victories in this game, was watching Debbie thrive in the way that she did.
You mentioned one of the surprises for you was the caliber of the players you were pitted against. Can you talk about the expectation of what you thought the competition would be like?
Yeah, it's really interesting because I think I was so in my head after seeing Ethan walk in. Because for those who don't know, or probably may not have seen Sydney Survivor, we played the single day game together. He was my number 1 ally. And part of the reason why I applied for Reelfoot was because I wanted to play a game where I was effectively anonymous and nobody knew me. And then the minute he walks in, I'm just like, oh my God, I flew all the way to the other side of the world. And he's probably thinking the exact same thing, because I spoke with him afterwards and he's like, yeah, I saw you. And I was just like, no. And I'm like, oh my God, it was that was quite stressful. And I think I got in my own head. I thought, if they're going to hear the accent straight away, it's something you can't really disguise. But what shocked me about these players, once I kind of got further into the game, and it wasn't as apparent until probably day 3 or day 4, but speaking to players like Sandra and Jeff, who had kind of known of other players in the game, and then Jeff came to me, I think, once we swapped onto the Green Tribe, and he said, I think this is a game where everyone is connected to somebody. And that's something I'd thought of initially when I saw Ethan. I'm like, oh, maybe this is a duos game and they just haven't announced it yet. And I thought maybe production did that to kind of get us all in our own head, which it worked effectively for me. But then observing the other players not really give a shit about whether they played before or not, that was something that was mind-blowing to me, because in Australia, as I said earlier, it's really rare to have the opportunity to play twice. And to see these players that have played multiple live games and not really care that other players had, that was something I couldn't really comprehend. But I think day 3 or day 4 or day 5, that was when I thought, okay, my pre-existing relationship with Ethan is less than a little blip on their radar.
Mhm.
And I don't need to worry about that because all of these other people are connected in some way, and they don't really rate that high. Well, my perception was it wasn't seen as a threat, a threatening aspect of.
In Australian LRGs, do you feel like people are targeted for having experience? So if you do have a player who has a chance to play a second season, do you feel like they are then targeted because of that?
I would suggest yes. I think just because the opportunities are so few and far between. I'm trying to think of some specific examples, but I have seen returning players do well, but maybe it could just be my own perception. Like I would probably think, because being a returning player is a huge advantage. Like I remember how much of a deer in the headlights I was in Sydney, but I'd had the privilege of playing that mini game in Melbourne. And although I did worse in terms of my placement in Sydney, I feel like I played a much better game. And then coming into Reelfoot, I feel like I've improved more. And look, regardless of my placement, if I ever do decide to play again, I'm hopeful that I can keep developing and keep changing. And that's kind of part of the reason why I wanted to play a long game as well.
Had you planned on discussing your experience in Sydney Survivor, keeping them the down low initially coming into Reelfoot?
I wanted to keep it on the down low. Like I did not want anyone to know about my experience, about the fact that Ethan and I had known each other and had worked together in a game. But it's interesting because I wish I had $1 for every time somebody in the game said, oh, that's just a day game. Because when I told them about my experience and I said, yeah, I played a game that went for a day, and they go, oh, it's just a day game. It was like completely not even relevant, which is really funny because I think it was a really great cast and a really fun game if anyone at home wants to watch the Sydney game. But yeah, it didn't seem to bother many people. And I think once I realized it wasn't as much of a thing as I built it up to be in my own head, I just relaxed about it and I was pretty open with people.
So it's 37 minutes. Let's talk about Reelfoot. So you arrive at Reelfoot. We've already talked about you see Ethan, that whole reaction. Did anyone else did you recognize any other cast members? Did anyone stand out to you in that pregame?
I did. I remembered Hannah and look, Hannah vaguely, but I remember Jeff from Outlast that I think aired earlier this year. Or late last year, because it was another Australian who was playing that game, and I watched it for that reason.
Yeah, you got beat the punch. so like you were not the first.
Another Matt as well, hence Matty P, because it was another Matt who played an American game, and he's also a really awesome player and an awesome guy. And I watched that season for him, and without spoiling it, there was a point where I stopped watching. But I did remember Jeff, and I remember speaking to him in the game and saying, have you played before? And he goes, oh, I just played. I think he said something like, I've just played a game in someone's backyard and it went for a day. And I'm like, I actually know that you're lying about this. But nobody else I recognized, to answer your question.
Did anyone make an impression on you pregame?
What do you mean by that? Sorry.
Did anyone stand out to you?
Oh, like when we're sitting on the porch. Oh, Kiri, just because I think her presence was very like intriguing. Joe, whilst we only crossed paths in the redemption part of the game, she was just this effervescent, like bright character, and we were sitting near each other before the game started, and I remember having a great conversation with her about all kinds of things, and then we didn't actually get to play together, which was sad because she's a real character. And Carl, obviously, he's got big main character energy, and gosh, I remember Trinity.
But you and Kiri were on the same tribe for good portions of the game, though. You don't feel like you had the chance to play with her?
Yes, I did, absolutely. Did I not answer? What was
I,
the question?
I thought you said that you felt like you didn't have a chance to play with Kiri in the game.
No, sorry, that was Joe
Okay, gotcha. Sorry about that.
from Green. No, that's okay. But yeah, no, Kiri, absolutely, we were working together pre and post merge. But no, there were big characters, and I think that's what really stood out. I was like, whoa, it's big personalities, big characters. It was perfect for my game to blend at the start.
Were you hoping that Ethan would be on your same starting tribe?
Hell no. Worst case scenario. I did not want that to happen.
Okay, so the game begins. You're divided into tribes. You are on the Pink Nonkana tribe. It's you along with Blake, Carl, Jeff, Jordan, Kiri, Sandra, Shauna, James, and Debbie. Talk to me about the initial impression you have of this group of people.
It was a really diverse mix, and I remember that really standing out to me when I came into the game, because I'm like, it's a great diversity in age, life experience. From what I could understand from initial conversations, game experience, personalities, like there were loud people, there were less loud people. It was just a really good cross-section of people, and they nailed the casting, I think, and the division of both the tribes as well. And like, as I said, there was that initial kind of strategic relationship I started with Shauna, and then I remember my initial kind of conversations were with Jordan, who came across as very kind of initially very loyal, really friendly. And then as the game went on, I was like, whoa, she's actually a lot more strategic and a lot bigger of a game player than I'd ever anticipated. Like, she really surprised me. But Carl was so much fun initially. I was just like, I love his energy. I love the fact that he knows how to play. He wanted to play hard. He was just constantly doing shit at camp and like good stuff. Like he basically made our shelter. I think it was him and James. And I was just like, this is fantastic. I have no survival skills whatsoever. Carl and James can manage all of the heavy lifting, and I'll just pick up sticks and throw them in the fire when needed.
Do you have any extensive camping or outside experience?
Very minimal. So I'd been camping voluntarily, I think once, up until about a month before I came into the game. And this is really interesting because doing the game prep, I think a video or a reel may have came up on the Live Reality Games page that I'm following on Instagram. And I remember this American girl talking about, hey, if you're playing an LRG in America this summer, these are the things you should do. And they recommended permethrin spray to keep the bugs at bay on your clothes. And they also recommended going camping. And so I was like, oh, that's actually probably a good idea. And because I had some time off of work, I drove and went camping by myself. Like I had we call it a swag in Australia. I think it's kind of like a tent, but smaller and fully enclosed. And so I went camping by myself and got zero sleep that night because I was terrorized by a wombat. And so this is the middle of winter, so there weren't many people at the national park where I'd gone camping, and this wombat just did not stop sniffing around my swag all night. And because I'm a tall guy, my head was pressed up against the canvas at one end. And I remember at one point, I think it must have been 1 or 2 a.m., I just felt this bang in the back of my head, and it was a wombat sniffing, and I was just jolted. Like I was like, all adrenaline. There was no way I was getting sleep that night after that. And the wombats down there are really kind of scary. Like they're missing clumps of fur. They look a bit mangy. It's almost like zombie wombats. And so I was sitting there going, no, can't do this. But I was glad I did it because that was really important preparation for not having sleep in the game. And I went for a hike the next day, and I managed to drive 3 hours back home without like nodding off or feeling too fatigued. And I think that was really important for the psychological prep, more so than the physical preparation. Just knowing that, like, yes, I was in a enclosed swag that was relatively safe, but I thought if I can get through that with no sleep and survive the cold, I can survive whatever Reelfoot throws at me.
Looking back at your original tribe, is there anyone you wish was on your tribe that landed on the green tribe?
Oh, interesting question. No, I was really happy with original non-Connor. I think we had, as I said, a great diverse mix. everything seemed to flow really well in the initial stages of the game. Not necessarily reflected in the challenge performance, but I think from a social level, it was fairly harmonious.
You talked about you get to camp and when you're opening conversations with Shauna's where you kind of really cement the ride or die relationship. Did you enter that conversation wanting that outcome or knowing that would be the outcome?
Oh, I definitely think that was the outcome I wanted, because there was just something about Shauna. She's got this presence where you just feel comfortable. Mm-hmm. And I think probably, I can't speak for everyone, but I think most players probably recognized her social game is like top tier. Like she's really, really great on the social side of things. And then kind of seeing her survival skills as well. Like she was foraging for edible plants and she could make fire. Like she ticked every box. And then watching her as the challenges unfolded, I didn't know this at the time, but something inside of me was just like, work with this person, trust this person. And I listened to that voice inside, and thankfully it was a good voice.
As you're setting up the tribe and talking to people, getting to know people, you've already mentioned Jordan as a person you're like, someone you wanted to work with. Did anyone else stand out to you?
Yeah, so I remember kind of thinking about an order in my head, and I remember I was trying to get to at least 5 people because I thought I want at least a 5 that I can work with, and we're kind of just need one more to have a majority. And I remember kind of being Shauna as my ride or die. Jordan was the other person in our 3, and we were like, if we could keep this going, that would be a good thing. And then Sandra and Jeff kind of came in, and we were working as a 5, or what I perceived to be a 5. And it was interesting. I'm watching a couple of the other podcasts in preparation for this, and I didn't realize there were alliances happening kind of everywhere. But that was my perception and my experience, was that it was Shauna, Jordan, Jeff, Sandra, and then also Carl. Like I had a great conversation with him, I think on day 2, and I felt quite locked and loaded with Carl, and he seemed to be quite close to Kiri. Kiri wasn't saying much at the start of the game, which you later find out it's because she was quite unwell at the start, and like she was very, very under the radar at the start, but then kind of became a much bigger player, and her threat level was kind of unmasked later. But I felt comfortable with my original 5, and then Carl and Kiri, and I was like, I think I really enjoyed chatting with Blake and James, but the challenge was, I think they were perceived as a duo. And I think that was initially what was kind of going off on people's threat radar. And obviously Debbie and I kind of had a really cute duo that I thoroughly enjoyed. And it was such a shame that the first vote went the way it did, because I loved working with her and just talking about life with her, because it was just so effortless, and she brought this energy that lifted me up. Because I was struggling in those first 2 days, but she always found a way. I was just laughing all the time with her. It was fantastic.
I want to segue a bit to advantages in the game. Do you have a general philosophy about idols and advantages of how you are you actively seeking them? Do you just want to know where they are? Are they not a factor into how you play?
I would like to know where they are, because I think that way you can kind of anticipate how you would like to play, and whether a move or a strategic direction you would like to move in will work or not. I think knowledge is the biggest thing. For me, having an advantage, I'm not discreet. I can't go discreetly sneaking off unless it's the middle of the night, but even then we need a flashlight. And so for me, coming in, I'm like, advantages are not something I'm going to be actively seeking. So I decided not to look unless it was a public clue, like what happened at Original Pink. And I obviously had a bit of a dig, but Carl was just straight onto it, and he found that idol within about 10 seconds.
You learned that this season you're playing. We already kind of talked about the redemption aspect. One of the other aspects is shot in the dark. What are your thoughts on that as an advantage?
That's a funny one, because I've never played a game that has had that in it before. And Debbie and I chatted a little bit post-game. and we were talking about whether she could have played a shot in the dark. And I was like, damn, I really didn't think of encouraging her to do that. And that was a big error on, I guess, in my game, probably reflecting after the game had ended and I'd had time to collect my thoughts, because I probably should have played it when I got voted out. But I was just, it's a testament to how well the swapped green tribe had me feeling comfortable that I didn't play it. Like, but then I guess my plan wouldn't have worked, or the plan I was proposing to Trinica and Ethan, and to do a 3-3 split, that wouldn't have worked had I played it. But it's something I've never had experience with playing in the game. I love it. I think it's a great addition, especially in fan-made games, because it gives players an opportunity to really get out of jail if played correctly.
And finally, you also have fire tokens in play this season.
Yes. It's interesting because I watched Melanie's podcast, how she was thinking they were going to have more power. I don't know why, but for whatever reason, I thought they were just going to be, go to the outpost, buy some things, the end. I thought, maybe someone will get a clue, maybe they'll get an advantage. That could be my naivety coming into the game and not truly understanding how powerful they could have been. But I think it leans into my philosophy on advantages in general, how I just thought, Matt, control what you can control, and that's your social game, your strategy, how you want to move forward. The advantages in that, if you get lucky, it will be what it will be, but I didn't want to put too much of my expectations on having an advantage or needing one.
So you have your first reward challenge this season. This is the Quest for Fire challenge. How was this for you?
I'm trying to remember. I remember Green did really well and they had a crazy lead on us. And I think probably a couple of minutes in, I probably wouldn't be alone when I would say I think we realized we probably were in a position where we couldn't come back from behind. And wasn't the best challenge, but we did our best.
So as an outcome of this challenge, you learn that there's an outpost that players will go to after challenges roughly. Melissa and Trinica go from Green, Okina. Blake and Carl are selected from Nankana. Talk about what happens when they come back to camp.
I vividly remember this, Stephen, because I was sitting there thinking, how the heck would it cost 6 or 7 fire tokens for a bag of rice that, like, I don't even know if it weighed 100 grams. Like, it was an abysmal amount of rice. How much? Sorry?
It was small.
It was like, I just thought, no, they're lying. Like, I was immediately suspicious of Carl and Blake because I thought there's no logical way they could have charged that many fire tokens for that tiny, tiny amount of rice. But then as the game went on, I realized, that was actually what it cost for them to purchase that.
So, evening day one, how are you feeling so far in the game?
Socially, pretty comfortable, I think, because I feel like I'd made enough connections, as I said earlier, with kind of the 7 that I was in. The conditions obviously were tough, like the rain and then the lightning storm. But interestingly, we have storms that are quite similar to that in Australia quite commonly. And so seeing that lightning, it was like constantly flashing. I was like, oh, this is kind of nice to be out in nature. I was just really enjoying it. I'm like, I'm not in danger. I'm with other people. I'll be okay. And I was just kind of like actively daydreaming. Oh, I remember why. Because I was too big to fit in a shelter. So I remember sitting with Shauna, I think, by the fire, and I just thought, I'm not even going to try and sleep because if I do, I'm going to have to sleep on the ground. And that wasn't pleasant. We only had one tarp. And so I just thought, you know what, Matt, just deal with it. You're not going to get any sleep tonight. You may as well just sit up. And then the rain started and then we all got under the cover and then the infamous lightning strike came down and made its mark. And that was when the panic, I think collective panic well and truly set in our tribe. But I was also surprisingly calm during that moment because I thought, well, the lightning struck about 10 meters in front of us. The odds of that happening again are pretty small. But if we walk back to the lodge, the chances of getting struck are higher. So I'm just constantly weighing up the risk benefit in my mind.
And the tallest person in my tribe.
Oh my God, I didn't even think about that. I was a lightning rod. But yeah, I kind of didn't want to go. And it was so muddy, Stephen. Like it was, I think Melanie or no, Debbie, I can't remember who mentioned it in a previous podcast, but it was rough. Like I think there was the risk of slipping, the risk of rolling an ankle. That for me, I was like, I don't want to go out in the game from an injury, just walking back to the lodge.
So your tribe is evacuated. You get back to the lodge. You get to sleep on the patio. From what I can tell, not the most comfortable sleeping experience.
No, it was so hard. Like the porch, it was just cold, hard. I was waiting for a rat to run over me or something. Thankfully, I didn't see any rats in this game, but it was rough. And it wasn't until I watched Debbie's podcast, I completely forgot I gave her my shoe to use as a pillow because I'm like, Matt, come on, like be resourceful. What can you use here? And so I had one of my shoes as my pillow, and Debbie's like, I'm not comfortable. I'm like, here, use my other shoe. She's like, it's too hard. And I'm like, we've got nothing else, sister. So like, you work with what you got.
Mm-hmm. So day 2, y'all are brought back to camp. You have your opening immunity challenge, kind of opening reward challenge. You do the vertical table maze. How was this challenge for you?
I had loads of fun. I sank one ball, so I was really happy. It was tough to get the balls originally because we were like, okay, we needed some kind of system to know who was running to each point, just so we didn't duplicate checking this, because you could only check, I think, 1 of 12 potential like compartments in these boxes where a ball could be, and we needed to retrieve 3. But yeah, I liked how, I think Melanie commented on this, how every player had the opportunity to do it, and it wasn't going to be one player that let it down for the entire team. Like they didn't have one person on the maze and other people running. I liked that kind of cyclical thing, and it was loads of fun. It was wet, but we're in the game. Adrenaline was running high. Yes, we were tired, but it was great fun.
So you lose this challenge. James and Sandra go to the outpost along with Charlie and Tony. You already kind of talked a little about this, but talk about what happens when they get back from the outpost.
I'm trying to remember.
This is when they come back with the idol clue.
Oh, yes, I remember this, of course. So, yeah, they come back, they read the clue publicly. It's something about the tribe flag, and basically the entire tribe just scurries off to the general direction of where the flag is and starts digging, because that was what the clue was for. So Carl found the idol, and it was a public immunity idol, so every player there knew that he had it. And yeah, it was what it was. Like we all had a bit of a dig, but he was just super efficient in going straight to the middle, kind of knew what he was doing. And I didn't as much. I was digging off to the side somewhere. Did
Carl having the immunity idol change anything in your game for you?
Yes, it made me want to work with him more, because I thought, look, he's got this idol, and makes him more powerful, gives him more options in the game. And I thought that initial, I might have had the conversation after he found that actually, but I remember we had this conversation. It was really nice. I think it was day 2. It was wet, people miserable, and we were just sitting under the shelter in the afternoon, and it was just a genuine human conversation. And he was asking me about my life, I was asking him about his life, and I just thought he's a really good human being and someone I genuinely want to work with. And I thought we're such opposite people, but we would make a really fun duo. And that was just, I thought, I want to work with this guy. And I don't think the idol influenced that much. It was more the human element that made me want to work with Carl.
And you have your last reward challenge of the day. This is the idol's hand challenge, where you're balancing the little thing on the pedestal and you have to knock off other teams. How'd it go for you? I mean, you would think that if you're tall, it's an advantage, but sometimes it doesn't feel that way when you play this game.
Have you watched the footage, Stephen?
There is no footage available, so I don't know.
Well, lower your expectations. I was a complete flop. It was disastrous. So at this point, nobody knew that I knew Ethan. he got up, I was like, I want to take on the other Australian, like trying to channel my inner straight boy. And I remember grabbing it, and I'd actually done this challenge in an unrecorded game in Victoria, in my home state here in Australia. And the actual idol was a lot heavier in the game that I played here.
Mm-hmm.
And so you had a lot more maneuverability in terms of how, like, you could almost have it on angle and it would still sit fairly upright. This one, it was this little egg thing. I remember going in, I put my arm back, boom, it's off, I'm out, the end. And I didn't even attempt to do it a second time. It was so embarrassing.
So were people asking you, do you know Ethan? Kind of like, he's Australian, you're Australian. Surely all Australians know each other. Was that a conversation you were having in the field early on in the game?
I remember a couple of people, I don't remember getting interrogated. I remember a couple of people like, oh, there's another Australian. I said, oh, and I think Sandra and Shauna asked me, and I said, I want to find out his name. Like, I was just being as vague as possible, because I said I might know him. Like, I might recognize his name from the community, or like he may have played orgs or something like that. I've never played an org. I just wouldn't be very good at orgs. I can barely respond to a one-on-one message, or like, I'd be the first person voted out. But your question was, sorry,
No, you answered it.
Okay.
So, having lost all 3 reward challenges, what's the vibe of the tribe like currently?
Look, it was somewhat flat, but I think if anything, it probably, like, not getting the food, not getting the reward, like, it sucked, but I think it kind of exposed some of the way that certain players dealt with that kind of pressure.
Matty, your mic is going static again.
Okay, let me switch this up again. Apologies. How's that, Stephen? Is that any better?
Sounds good. All right, continue. So you were saying it kind of exposed some certain players?
Yeah, I think, look, when players are put under stress, whether it be fatigue, hunger, like losing consecutively, I think it brings out elements of people's personalities that you may not see if you're on a winning streak.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, like, you could see people like Shauna and Sandra were quite resilient in those moments. Like Carl, like, he's such a competitor, but it didn't seem to crack him at all. But like, it may have started to show in some players.
You mentioned earlier, James and Blake are seen as a duo. What is your relationship with the two of them like at that going into this point in the game, right before that first immunity challenge?
Yeah, it's interesting because I remember them both being very central and very social at camp, but we just hadn't talked game. So we were talking kind of chit chat, life stuff, but we didn't really go into a game conversation. So unfortunately, I didn't get an opportunity because I think, like, the people I'd started to form relationships with, I thought, if that's my 7 majority, that's who I kind of want to stick with going forward, which is unfortunate because, I think James, he was a really strong player, and I think like he was physically strong. He had this like kind of leader kind of quality about him, and Blake was just like really fun, very social. I saw him in loads of conversations, and for me, it was probably my threat radar was going off a little bit, especially them as a duo. I thought if they survive the first couple of votes, they'll go all the way to like final 6 or 5 or something like that. That was, I think, what was going through my mind at that point.
You mentioned you're feeling you have an alliance of 7 at this point.
That was my perception, yes.
Who is not in the alliance?
Actually, no, I'm so sorry. I keep forgetting. Don't hate me, Debbie, if you're watching this. So Debbie was in there as well because I really, really wanted Debbie. I think probably Blake and James were the only 2 that from my perspective, I wasn't actively working with, because I thought, look, if it does come to a vote, it'd be one of the 2 of those that I think would be the most logical choice, just because they presented as such a strong duo, and I could not identify any other duos in our tribe. So just purely from a strategic, social, observational perspective, that's why. And I didn't kind of want to invest too much socially into them, because I thought, look, if we do have to go to a vote and I have to vote one of them out, I kind of feel like an asshole doing that. And which is
Are you hearing any other names prior to the first mini challenge?
His name came up, and I think like we did discuss that, and she was aware that her name had come up. But as I said earlier, I probably should have pushed her to play her shot in the dark. But not knowing the mechanics of that advantage from an in-game perspective was a big oversight on my end, because it may have been enough to save her.
So you go to your first mini challenge. This is the kayaking challenge that ends the puzzle. It does not go very well for your tribe.
No, I think there was a lot. From what I can recall, there was a lot of anxiety from quite a few people on our tribe, because I'd never kayaked. I was panicking. I'm not good in water, like swimming, kayaking, anything. I'd never kayaked before, so we'd obviously had a few struggles at the start. But by the time I got out there and started paddling, thankfully someone back from within our tribe, I think it may have been Jeff, was like yelling some really clear instructions. He's like, left, right. And then so I was just listening to what he was saying, and I was able to I started off on a bit of a crooked path, but yeah, he managed to steer me in the right direction.
So you lose the challenge. Your first tribal council is the following morning. I know one of the things you talked about in final tribal council is regretting not pushing to save Debbie more. Talk me through the strategy and the scramble that evening, the following morning, leading up to the tribal council.
So from what I recall, unfortunately, I think it was fairly unanimous in terms of the tribe wanting to vote Debbie. It was challenging, because I think Debbie acknowledged in her interview that she didn't want to push too hard at that particular point. And then my kind of thought process was, look, if that's the majority, I don't want to come in too hard too soon. And so I just had to kind of acquiesce with where the tribe wanted to go. But obviously, I don't know. Look, I think Debbie would have told me had she had an advantage, because I was working with her. But I think that it almost felt like the vote was kind of going to go the way it was, unfortunately.
To my understanding, so the vote ends up being a 7-2-1. 7 votes Debbie, 2 votes James, 1 vote Blake. Debbie casts a vote for Blake. You and Shauna, to my understanding, cast the vote for James. Why vote that way?
That's correct. So I think, just in case there was an idol in play, we wanted a plan B. And I think I had discussed with a couple of the other players, because I obviously didn't want Debbie to go home. I'd pitched James to Sandra, Jordan, Kiri, basically all the girls from what I can recall. And Debbie was on board with that as well, but it wasn't what the majority wanted for the first vote. So they said, look, if we go this way for the first vote, we'll vote with you in the next vote. And so that was kind of where I met them halfway. So
what was the follow-up from this tribal council like?
Not very fun. Blake was, James was quite upset. And I remember us discussing it as a group. And we're like, what do we do about the fact that me and Shauna voted for James? And everyone's like, just deny, like just lie. And I'm a terrible liar. And Shauna, I saw her go off with James, and I think she just denied it. And then he came back, and I remember, I think I said something like, I said, "Oh, are you okay, mate?" And just silence. He just ignored me. And I was like, okay, time for Matty P to like recoil back into the shrub like Homer in that very infamous gif. And I remember very consciously after that vote, I distanced myself from every player. I didn't want to be seen having any kind of strategic conversation with anybody. I remember doing that for maybe 1 or 2 hours, just like still doing work around camp, but just not being seen to be with someone, because I thought, like, obviously, James had an emotional reaction to that in that moment, which is completely valid. But I just thought, to make sure that I'm not the one that's targeted next, I need to be as invisible as I can be. And he did actually end up asking me, I think a couple of hours later, was it you? And I said, yep, it was. I owned it. I just said it was me. We needed a plan B in case an idol came out, and yeah, I'm sorry. And I think you respected that.
Yeah, and there's a great scene where it's you and Shauna, and Shauna's just going deny, 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 deny. So yes,
I haven't seen it.
It's
I'm looking forward to that.
let's see. I think it's one of the videos in my spreadsheet somewhere.
Amazing.
So,
I can go back and watch it. I just
your free time.
Just my thoughts. I made a kind of conscious decision not to watch too much footage, because I'm like, I want to remember the game how I remembered it and make my own little notes and stuff. And I watch bits and pieces, but
and when the episodes come out, you'll have those.
Exactly. Yeah, I'll have a nice, polished, edited version to enjoy with friends.
Thankfully, your tribe actually pulls off some victories finally for the next 2 immunity challenges. You have the silent relay race. You have the steal the bacon, which your tribe wins. Any thoughts about those challenges?
Yes, I want to comment on steal the bacon. So that was the medicine ball challenge. I didn't realize at the time, but Tony, thank you for your service. The fact that you kind of did that thing where he dodged, like, because he got to the ball first because he's a lot quicker than I am. And I was kind of guarding him. I was doing this big wide stance. And then he kind of like was kind of playing with me, like, and he just like ran past me. That meant, I think my tribe thought I was one of the slower people. Thank God I didn't have to be involved in any of those physical, like, borderline MMA style, like, grappling situations, because I would have definitely injured myself. And I just remember looking at that and thinking I got out of jail free in that moment. Like, and that's why I said thank you, Tony, because he really helped set that precedent that I wasn't one of the faster people, and he just whizzed by me. And then so I think Carl had a really grueling one-on-one with Tony. Jeff had a couple of grueling one-on-ones. And oh my God, Jordan and Trinica, for anyone who hasn't watched this footage, it is one of the most iconic challenge moments from the entire season. Like, Jordan and Trinica were, and I think that's when it became really physical, because they just did not give up. Like, they were locked, and they gave it 150%. It was so awesome to watch. And then I think everyone else had the expectation that they needed to be put that much on the line as well. And I'm just thinking, thank God I've already gone, and no one expects me to go, because I would have injured something in my frail body.
So this leads us to the 4th challenge, or the 4th immunity challenge, which you learned both tribes from the tribal council, and is a gross food challenge. What are your thoughts on how good are you at gross food challenges?
Awful. So I copped a bit of crap about this, because there was a gross food eating challenge in Sydney Survivor, and I opted not to go for it. And it's out in the public domain, so anyone can watch it. So Christy Bennett, who won Australian Survivor Season 1, was in that game. And she's a vegetarian. I'm a vegetarian. We both were like, we can't do this. I'd recently, in the Sydney Games, started on a medication where he gave me dry mouth. And I'm like, they're going to give us a Weet-Bix or something. I'm not going to be able to do it. And so I'd kind of worked myself into a panic. Christy then steps up on behalf of our tribe, almost chokes. I'm like, I had to run over and do like borderline first aid. And so me chickening out of a challenge almost killed the OG winner of Australian Survivor. So yes, I'm the asshole, but thankfully she's still alive and everything is fine. So I have like legitimate trauma with this as well, because when I was a kid, I almost choked on a piece of chicken. And I remember my family, or whoever I was with at the time, I was young, like 4 or 5. I couldn't swallow it. People were laughing at me. It was just this really awful, traumatic moment. And that's a large part why I choose not to eat meat. It's not that I never eat meat. but especially in an environment like a gross food eating challenge where you have to do it quickly, it's the worst possible thing that I could ever do. And so, yeah, going into that, I didn't want to sit out because I looked at what the first thing was. It was like mashed potato baby food or something. And I'm like, I can do that. There'll be nothing I can choke on in that. Item 2, tofu. Justice for tofu. I love it. Like, tofu is one of my favorite foods ever. I was like, yes, bring on like the additional protein, the calories. I was here for it. Like, that was probably the most food I'd eaten in the first 3 days. And then James had beaten me at that point, and I didn't end up qualifying to the next round, which was worms, which I would not have been able to do. So it ended up the way it was supposed to.
So Carl wins for your tribe. Trinica wins for the Okina tribe. This is, you have all night the next morning to strategize. Talk me through the strategy here, because ultimately it's going to be a blindside on James.
Yeah, so I think it was, from what I recall, it was fairly accepted that was the way the vote was going to go. I don't recall there being a talk of splitting the vote, and I recall it being generally in most people's interest for the vote to go that way. It was unfortunate we weren't able to include Blake in that, but it was just because of that perception that was such a tight duo. And yeah, I remember after the vote, Blake was, he was fine. I think it kind of, it was what it was. And Carl having his idol, we felt quite comfortable that there wasn't going to be another advantage at play.
Did you know that Shauna was going to be receiving the vote from the minority?
Oh, sorry, what was that, Stephen?
Did you know Shauna would be receiving votes at Tribal Council?
No, I don't think I did. I don't recall being in, because I think this was still when I was trying to be invisible as much as possible. So unless I needed to be in a conversation with someone, I tried to just back away. And so I knew where Shauna was voting. I knew where Sandra was voting. Carl and Kiri and Jeff and Jordan. I knew where the seven votes were going. And so I just, I figured it could have been me or it could have been Shauna, just purely from the previous round where we voted James.
So after James is voted out, could you, and this is early day 4, could you rank the remaining members of your tribe from most important to your game to least important to your game?
Tough question, Stephen. So is this after James had...
James has been voted out, so there's 8 people on the non-contact tribe.
Yeah, I think it was as I described earlier. So Shauna was integral to my game as my ride or die. Second, I think probably Jordan, and then Sandra, Jeff. It's a tough one because Carl had jumped up the ranks at that point, but Carl was probably more important. Kiri, it's interesting because she was not well those first few days. We talked, but we didn't really talk game from what I can recall. And yeah, so her, like, it was really tricky because if we had to vote again, I don't know where we would have gone. And I think Blake at that point, we started talking a little bit more, and it would have been, we didn't get to talk game because I think it was what?
Your microphone.
Oh, sorry, one moment.
We're just going to cycle through your endless microphones. It'll all be good.
How's that? Is that okay?
Much better. So you're saying that it would Blake be the next vote, or was someone else going to be the next vote, you think?
I don't know. We didn't get that far in the conversation.
But who would you have liked to go after?
Look, I think, unfortunately, logically, it would have had to have been Blake because I was actively working with everyone else.
And now the harder, if you vote up Blake and you have to go to one more tribal council, who would you have wanted to go after?
Maybe only because I know this player had lied to me, but Jeff, about his experience in Outlast, because I think everyone else had been quite open about their game experience. Like Sandra had told me she'd won Survivor Angelica. Shauna had said she'd won Survival Challenge. And so I'm like, if everyone else is being open and Jeff hasn't, that for me was like, I don't know if I can keep working with this person. So
how much were you anticipating a swap?
Oh, I think I was ready for it after the second vote because both the one-day games I played, we swapped after 2 votes.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was fast, rapid, like no time to really think. Whereas in this, it was like, okay, we got through 3 votes, no swap. 4 votes. I was sure it was going to happen after the 4th vote. And then we got to 5 and then the swap happens. It was unusual. I've never swapped in an odd number before.
Yeah, so it's day 4. You have a swap. Let's talk about your new tribe. So you moved from the pink tribe to the green Okina tribe. So from your original tribe, you have Carl, Jordan, and Jeff. And from the original green tribe, you have Trinica, Melissa, and Ethan. And on paper, this is looking good. You are in a 4-3 majority for this tribe.
In theory, it should have been pretty straightforward to get to the merge. Like I was feeling confident. I thought, look, I've worked with Ethan before. I know he's super loyal. If he's with someone, I thought I could bring him in. But then obviously everything got turned on its head when Carl, to his credit, made a really big move and flipped on our original pink alliance and went to vote out Jeff. And I think it ended up being Jeff ended up, I think from memory, playing his shot in the dark.
Yeah. Let's back up a bit. We'll get into that. I'm curious. So you have Carl, Jordan, and Jeff. Are those your ideal 3 people you would want to swap with, or is there anyone you wish you had swapped with instead from your original pink tribe?
Look, I felt comfortable with that combination of players because, as I said, I felt closest probably with Jordan and Carl equally at that point. And then Jeff, I trusted as well because I could see he was quite close with Sandra. And I think knowing he was kind of didn't have Sandra with him, he would logically work with us. And I was very happy with that combination.
Okay. And so looking at, okay, yeah, we'll talk about it. So you have your first immunity challenge as your new tribe. This is a blindfold challenge. How was this for you?
I loved it. This was so much fun because I felt like at the start of the game, we talked about what are our strengths? What are our weaknesses? And I'm like, what strengths do I have? I'm like, I enjoy playing a social game, but I don't want to like make that a focal point. And so I was like, I'm kind of good at throwing things. And then, yeah, that came back to haunt me a little bit later. But this was good because I had done a very similar challenge to this in the unrecorded game that I played. There are actually a lot of parallels. And I thought I had this technique and all of the players are a bit skeptical at the start in terms of like how players should turn when they're blindfolded. And so I said, think of a clock. And if I say, I would say, do not move until you hear my voice. And say, like, for example, I think Carl was with Ethan. And I said, Carl, Ethan, 5 minutes to the left. And so you imagine like turning like 5 minutes on a clock. And then I was able to pretty accurately get people to
microphone again.
Oh, Jesus Christ. How is that, Stephen?
Much better. So you were kind of having people move themselves kind of like angles on the clock.
Yeah, effectively, and that seemed to work. I was super loud. I was a bit nervous people may not understand my accent, but it cut through. So the deep voice and the loud voice came in handy for something.
What went wrong with this challenge?
We could not do the puzzle. It was we got it, and it was that 3D cube puzzle where it all fits into place, and it did not fit into place for us. And we tried a bunch of different combinations. I thought we had a pretty significant head start on the pink swap tribe, and we just couldn't get it to work.
So you lose this challenge, you're back in a new camp. I guess before we talk about the strategy, you know Ethan. What were your, and we'll talk more about them, but you're meeting Melissa and Trinica for the first time. Talk to me about them.
I quite enjoyed, like, I could tell that Trinica and Ethan were quite close. So, and I think this is probably fault in my own game and reading people. Like, I think I probably put a lot of blind trust in Trinica because I saw like I'd managed to pull Ethan away for like 30 seconds or a minute. And I just said, who are you working with? Who are you closest with? And I think he said Trinica is my number one, or that's all I can remember. And so I was like, okay, in my brain, I'm like, they're safe. Let's leave it at that. I think because those three, along with Melissa, were in the minority and there was talk of Melissa being the vote. I didn't connect much with Melissa in that particular before going to that tribal. And then, yeah, I don't want to jump too far ahead if you have.
So talk to me about the strategizing, because like on paper, again, you're in a 4-3 majority. You just now you pick off one in minority, but things get a little bit more complicated because you don't know about any idols or advantages, and Carl does have an idol, and then you have Ethan who you know of. So just walk me through this here because it's going to be complicated, I imagine. Yeah,
so Carl having his idol kind of kept his name off the table. So I thought, look, if something does go sideways, it's probably me or Jeff or Jordan that are going to be the collateral damage. And I looked at, I don't know, I trusted Jordan, I trusted Jeff, I knew we were tight. I did trust Carl as well. And it was interesting because I think at that point Ethan and Trinica said there was a clue, but no one had apparently found the idol. But I think that's when Melissa found it was during our scramble situation. Okay. And credit to her, because I think she knew her name was up and it probably would have been her going home. And yeah, she hustled, played it correctly. And yeah, it was a very, very spicy tribal.
So did you have any inkling or indication that Carl was going to play his idol?
No, that was a complete shock, but it was also a really good outcome, I think, from a game perspective, because it meant his idol was then out of play, which I thought was a good thing. But seeing him flip, him now working with Melissa, Trinica, and Ethan, and then us, like it was basically me and Jordan were on the bottom.
Well, during this tribal council, Ethan also flips, right? Because Ethan votes for Melissa with you, correct?
Yeah, that was a funny one. I don't really understand what happened there, because I think what happened, I can't recall. You'll have to ask him that question, but I think like we were voting together. Jordan was voting with us as well, but then because Jeff had played his shot in the duck, he didn't have a vote. So it was me, Jordan, and Ethan voted together on Melissa, and Trinica, Carl, and Melissa voted for Jeff and sent him home. Because Melissa played her idol correctly, Carl just played it out of, I guess, potential risk of getting idled out, which is a really valid. Like I would have probably played it if I was in his situation as well.
How obvious was it that the minority was voting Jeff? Because Jeff was rightly nervous enough to play his shot in the dark.
I'd heard his name, and I can't remember. I think it was on the walk to tribal council, and I'm like, oh my God. And I think that was like we realized Carl had flipped. And so me, Jeff, and Jordan were kind of trying to think about what we could do. But I just remember Jeff panicking. And I don't know what conversations he had, but I just knew that I was voting the way I was going to continue to vote. I didn't know Melissa had the idol. So it was really well played on her part.
Why do you think Jeff was targeted over, say, you or Jordan?
I did find this out after the vote, but I didn't know in that moment.
Let's say Jeff is successful with the shot in the dark, and so all votes nullified. 3 votes for Melissa do not count. 3 votes for Jeff do not count. At this point, Jeff, Melissa, and Carl are immune. What happens in the revote?
Oh, that's a great hypothetical. So who's up? Me, Trinica, Ethan,
yeah,
Jordan.
So yeah, you, Trinica, Ethan, Jordan.
Oh, that's I honestly don't know. It would have been a very interesting tribal council had that been the case. I think it probably would have been me or Jordan.
Would you have voted for Trinica?
Based on everything I'd known up until that point, probably not.
So then, are you voting for Ethan or Jordan then?
for Ethan. So I would have been a snap decision I would have had to make in that moment.
Yeah, so Jeff goes out. What is the fallout from this tribal council like?
I remember being, I was a bit upset. I think the emotion had started to finally find its way out of my person. And I remember shedding a few tears because I think I was just bummed that I thought Carl and I were really tight. But yeah, he played the game much better than I had up until that point. And yeah, completely flipped it on its head, finds himself in a new majority of 4 versus me and Jordan. And that was pre-mutiny occurring.
So let's talk about the mutiny advantages. How aware were you of these advantages?
I think it came up as we were about to go to the challenge. I can't remember how Jordan had actually acquired her advantage. I just remember it being a thing and that it was presented. And I remember saying to her, like, she goes, I don't have to play it. I can stay with you. And I just said, don't blow your own game up for me. I said, go. I was like, I genuinely didn't want her to fall on her sword for me when she could have got back to the other tribe, been with Shauna, been with Sandra. And so I wanted her to go purely out of saving herself.
In retrospect, do you feel like you doomed her? Because she goes to the other tribe and gets voted out in the other tribe.
It's wild that it went that way. Like I was
also true.
I thought she was going to be in such a better position. But then I guess Tony also mutinied at the same time. So I think Tony may have been the next vote over on the swapped pink, and Jordan may have been in a better position. But I remember watching that footage and going back because I couldn't comprehend what actually happened. And yeah, I think someone gave an advantage to Melissa, and then Melissa gave it back to Tony, and Tony mutinied back. So it was just this like passing of this advantage, and I had no idea what was happening. And then all of a sudden, Tony was part of our tribe, and then I was in a 1-5 minority, which was not much fun. That's all I remember. I was just like, okay, I'm really screwed here. We've just got to win challenges, otherwise I'm cooked.
Yeah, so after the mutiny, Jordan is now on pink. You receive Tony. Let's assume Carl is fully with the greens. It's not a good spot to be in, right? And kind of like you said, we need the win out. Well, you do win the next 3 mutiny challenges. You win the crate endurance challenge. You win hot pursuit. You win. There's a beanbag toss with a puzzle component. You win all 3 of those challenges in a row.
Yeah, and that was probably one of the really high points of the game, because we, as a byproduct of winning those 3 challenges, we got to spend almost 24 hours together as a tribe. And despite me being on the very bottom, it was a real social highlight of the game. And we were just like, I hadn't laughed so hard as I did in that 24 hours. And I can't wait to see the footage come through in the episodes, because it was this real genuine moment where we're just enjoying each other's company, and it was so much fun and so many laughs, and it didn't feel like we were in the game. It just felt like we were chilling out at camp. And then I think we called ourselves the Musty Misfits, the 6 of us. And I'm like, yeah, I'm on the bottom, but this is still really fun. So I was just like, when you're in that position, I think you've got 2 choices. You can let it eat you up from the inside, or you can just have fun with it. And I went with the latter and had lots and lots of fun with the 5 of them.
A player meeting for the first time is Tony. Talk to me about Tony.
He surprised me because I think my initial perception standing on the mat at pink when the game started, looking over, I thought Tony and Charlie, I thought they were these big alpha male characters, and I was really intimidated by them at the start, and I was actually a little bit scared. And then I met Tony. I'm like, oh, he's actually this really like nice gentleman, and he's like wants to play game, and he's like kind of softly spoken, and just completely changed my perception of him through meeting him. And it was in a good way, in a very good way.
Any other highlights from your time with this tribe on your immunity streak?
I think it was just that 24 hours where we really did just like forget about the game for a little bit. And it was this nice period in the middle where, like, I think it was day 3. It must have been day 4.
Day 4 or day 5.
Yeah. So it was kind of, we knew we were getting through the halfway point. I didn't know this until after the game, but I spoke with Trinica. She searched my bag overnight there at on the Green Swap Tribe, and here I am being all comfortable, thinking, yeah, I'm part of this like musty misfits group, and then while I was sleeping and snoring, Trinica was fossicking through my bag, and obviously didn't find anything.
Strategically, what are you doing at this point? Because you are on the bottom. What are you doing to try to get off the bottom?
So I did have an opportunity when the mutiny advantages were played on the challenge map. After that challenge, that was the crate. Yes, it was the crate challenge, the endurance one. Sandra passed me a scroll, and Melissa clocked it. She saw it happen, and somebody else saw it happen as well. And they both come up to me individually, and I think Melissa and Trinica both said, "What advantage do you have?" And Carl came up as well. And so I'm thinking, okay, it was nothing. It was a fake. Like, it was basically the clue to the pink idol from the original Pink Tribe that Sandra kept. But I'm like, oh my God, thank you, Sandra. This might be the Hail Mary that saves me. And so I said to Carl, I lied and I said it was an extra vote. Because then I thought, okay, look, if I can manage to work with Trinica and Ethan and chip away at them, at least we can get a 3-3 split. And I wanted to go to Rocks if that was an option. And I said to Trinica and Ethan, I'd go to Rocks for either of you two. But ideally, I wanted to get to a revote and spook maybe Melissa and Tony, or Melissa and Carl, into not going to Rocks for whoever we decided to vote for.
So you have this fake event, or the scroll, which is fake. You're calling an extra vote. Did you disclose to anyone that this was fake?
No, nobody. Actually, maybe I don't even think I told. No, I definitely didn't tell Ethan, because I think I knew how close he was with Trinica. And by this time, we're like day 4, day 5. I knew that any previous like game loyalty we had was completely separate. Like, we were kind of finding our own path and working with our own people. And I thought that's the only leverage I have, is this mystery advantage. So I didn't tell, from what I recall, I don't think I told anyone what it was or wasn't.
Because I remember, because I watched the Final Trouble Council last night, and so Trinica brings it up as one of the reasons why she eventually ends up flipping on you, was because of that mystery advantage, or because you had or hadn't told her something about it?
Yeah, and I'd completely forgotten about that in the Final Trouble, if that was the reason. I couldn't recall that conversation. I think I was panicked a little bit by the time the strategy chats were happening when we did lose that swimming challenge. And I think I just thought, look, this is my only point of leverage. I'm kind of damned if I do reveal it, and I'm damned if I don't. But I'm glad I stuck to my guns and decided to not reveal what it was, because at least I tried.
What? So, like, when you say reveal what it was, reveal that it was fake, or reveal that it was an extra vote?
Reveal that it was fake, because Melissa and Trinica were both pressuring me to show it to me. I want to see it. And I'm
gotcha.
Like,
so because you weren't showing them, and therefore they didn't trust you.
Yeah, and so I said, if we get through this vote, I will show you what it is, which I was then going to reveal it was a fake, but didn't get the opportunity. And they got me real good.
So as you're going through this immunity streak, right? You go from 12 players to 13 players to 12 players to 11 players. When do you think the merge is going to be happening?
Oh, where were we? So I was.
You mutiny when there's 14. So Blake goes and he's in 14th place, and so there's 13 players left. Shauna goes, 12 players left. Jordan goes, 11 players left. Like, are you just like, when's the merge? When's the merge? When's the merge?
I'd expected it to happen earlier. So the fact that it went that late. Oh, one thing I did notice was at Tribal Council, the number of like really big stools. I think I counted 11 or 12. And I thought that's going to be the number of people that are going to be in the merge. It was either 11 or 12, I can't remember. Because I remember looking at it and I'm thinking, if I couldn't see the 12th or 13th stool, it wouldn't be they wouldn't roll it out just for the merge, because it was a big distance away. They looked really, really heavy. And so I was just thinking there's going to be 12. For whatever reason, I thought 12 players emerge. And then when we didn't merge and we got to 12 or 11, I'm like, I don't know what's going to happen. And I still was convinced at this point that it was only going to be one person coming back from Battleback as well.
While you're winning, you're watching what's happening to their tribe. Blake goes out, Shauna goes out, Jordan goes out. What are your thoughts watching these outcomes from the other tribal councils?
I knew that tribe had kind of been turned on its head. I think the biggest shock for me was the Shauna vote, because I thought she was in a really good position. And yeah, I don't know what happened. And then I learned later that it was Kiri that had flipped. And then I thought, like, great, I've lost Carl, I've lost Kiri. I'm losing people. Like, I lost Shauna. And then Jordan goes. I just thought, wow, I really don't have many options left. And yeah, it would have been, I was thinking at that point, I'm kind of up shit creek without a paddle, as we would say down here.
So it's the final 11. You have the swimming fish puzzle. You lose that immunity challenge. You're going to the tribal council. We've kind of talked around this. Was there anything else around the strategy to this vote you want to go into?
No, it's pretty much what I've shared already. Like, I was trying to bluff. I was absolutely convinced Trinica was voting with us. So, and credit to her, she made me feel incredibly comfortable. Like, I think that's a testament of how strong a player she is. And to the best of my knowledge, it was her first live game. And I feel like I have a pretty good judge of character when I'm in a game. And I thought she was with me, and she absolutely wasn't. And as I said earlier, she got me real good. Like, that was a complete blindside. I wasn't even sure if Ethan had voted for me as well. I didn't. Yeah, it was. I remember being shocked, and that was just a bit of a blur.
So I don't know how. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on redemption, because you already kind of talked through this with Justin, some of the main points. But I want to dwell on that first of the 3 challenges to get back in the game. It is an endurance balance challenge. We have to have your leg up to balance a pot like on a raised stick. You are against Jeff, and Jeff is probably one of the fiercest competitors you can have in these kind of challenges. And you are a self-proclaimed, I am not a challenge person. That is not my game. So talk about this challenge.
So this was really tough. And I think for me, it was all about focus, because like, physically, I thought I don't have anything on Blake or Jeff. Because when we knew it was one guy going back in, one girl, I just thought, look, they're both stronger than me. Matt, you've just got to dial in. Just like block everything else out and just focus on what you need to do. And like, as I said earlier, around focusing on the sandbag, knowing that if that drops, my whole game is done. And so my attitude going into that was, I'm going to pass out before I let go. I don't care what level of pain I'm going through. I don't care what my body's doing. I remember in that moment, I got dizzy 3 or 4 times, and I actually thought I might have passed, like, be in the process of passing out. Like, I've never had that fortunately happen to me before, but I thought I was going to pass out. It was hot. But I just thought I'd rather that happen than me drop out due to pain or other things. But yeah, interestingly, I just want to circle back a little bit to the start of this challenge, because Melanie touched on this in her interview, but Jeff, there was I think production had said they thought he might have touched something or done something. And I remember there being quite a bit of chatter around this for like 5 or 10 minutes. And this was right at the start. And I think Blake had dropped at this point. So I knew it was just him and me. And I was just thinking, Matt, block out the noise, block out the noise, block out the noise. Because if I let that get in my head, he ultimately wasn't disqualified and he was still in it. That could have really derailed. It could have ended my game right there. And so I just was like, I don't care what noise is happening. I just need to focus. And I'm really proud of myself. I was able to block out that noise, because it's not something I can do in my ordinary life. And there was just something about that moment in the game where my brain went to a different place.
You go for about an hour, right?
I think it was just over an hour. Yeah.
Okay. You're able to win. You are through the first heat. Now the second heat is social one, so you get to vote for a player that you get to vote for one male, one female player. Talk about the decision to vote for Blake over Jeff.
Yeah, so there are a couple of layers to this. Like I remember having a really nice conversation with Blake back at camp. And look, I think there were moments where I had pretty vulnerable conversations with most people, and it was two-way. Like we were sharing things about our lives, and I was just really touched by something that he said, and it kind of hit an emotional core with me, and I knew how much it would have meant to him to have come back in the game. And I think it was purely a strategic decision to vote out, like to not vote Jeff to progress, because like I didn't know what the next challenge was. I thought it was going to be a puzzle. And Jeff had, earlier in the game, we were talking about puzzles that we could do or couldn't do. I can do one that I've memorized. It's the instant insanity puzzle.
That's a good one to memorize.
Yes, I've got a little model of it somewhere here at home. I was going to bring it up, but I know the method of how to do it, solve it quite quickly. And I was sharing that with Jeff, and he goes, I know how to do half of it. And then I said, the top half is just a process of elimination. He goes, no, you can actually do it. Like you can solve the top one, like the third one as well. And I'm like, damn, he's good. And so that for me was like, he's way too much of a threat for me to take a chance at going head to head with him at a puzzle. But then Blake was also good. So I was kind of between a rock and a hard place. But I think it was that conversation I had with Blake and knowing that I think Jeff was probably slightly stronger in the puzzle aspect. And then the other thing was there was an element of bias in my decision, because I knew that from everything I'd known up until that point, and seeing what happened at Green when everyone flipped on Jeff, or well, not everyone, Carl flipped, but the others didn't want to keep working with him. I thought that Blake would have a better chance of going further in the game. So there were many layers to that decision. And yeah, it's sad because I was with Jeff and we were working together and voting together. And I think it was just we didn't have the opportunity to develop a social connection. And it was partly self-preservation as well on my end.
Is you versus Blake in the fire making competition with Shauna versus Melanie? I'm assuming you want Shauna to get back in, given everything we talked about Shauna. Talk about the fire making challenge against Blake.
Yeah, that was another tricky one because obviously there was a lot of noise. Like Shauna won and she was right next to me. And so she's obviously elated and so happy that she's back in the game. And I'm just trying to block it out because I'm like, Matt, you just got to keep working on this. And I wasn't making much progress. I couldn't get the magnesium to spark. The materials that, like, I don't know, for whatever reason, I thought we were going to get the kit with the kindling
nice
and
kit,
whatever.
yeah.
No, we weren't afforded that luxury. We had to go and find our own materials, and it was tough because despite it being not having rained, I think for 3 days at that point, that area was under quite a bit of shelter. So the materials were quite damp, a lot of what we were finding. And that was why I then thought, okay, Matt, like how high can you stack these leaves? Because I thought I might get it to burn, but it's only going to burn for 10 or 15 seconds. And I'd known that the torches had their wicks soaked in kerosene.
Yes.
Do you call it kerosene in the US? Yeah. So I knew it just needed to be licked by a flame to catch. And so that was why I then started stacking the leaves when we were out there for about 10 minutes. But that was a big moment because I've never made fire before then. So that was definitely a high point. Like that on top of the endurance thing, I was just like, wow, like it was the reset I needed.
So you and Shauna win, come back in the game. My favorite thing about you coming out of the game is you get the site, you have two tribes still, and the production's like, you're going to draw buff to see what tribe you join. What is going through your mind? You're like, oh no, this is not a merge. I'm still in these swap tribes.
So a little Easter egg. I think that's the correct term. We were actually given the heads up from production that was going to be the case. So we said we want to gag the rest of the players.
Okay, so you were in on it.
Shauna and I were in on it. And so Like we came out, I remember looking like unusually like stern faced because I was like trying to channel a bit of the anger from being voted out, which was very off brand, and I don't think I did it very well. And then we merged, and it was a awesome surprise. I could just see the other players being so relieved that that was where we're all going.
How was the merge feast?
That was interesting because I remember being a little bit cheeky because I obviously reconnected with OG Pink. So Kiri and I were talking. I think I sat with Ethan, which was really nice because then at that stage, I think I realized he didn't vote for me. He told me he was blindsided by Okina for the vote for when I went home. It was great to get some food, but then it was funny because there wasn't much eye contact between me and the 4 people that had voted me out, and I remember being a little bit cheeky, but it was all in good fun. And then I remember looking around because I'm like, there would definitely be a clue in here somewhere, and I didn't realize Kiri had found it until the next day. But yeah, it's interesting because playing the game, I think I alluded to earlier in the preparation, like I knew sleep wouldn't really derail me as much as I thought it would. Having a meal that big, I think that was a big derailer. Like a lot of us were feeling it. I wasn't alone in my gastrointestinal distress that night. Let's just put it that way.
You don't see on Survivor, like, I don't think you want to see on Survivor. I like when you're like day 15, day 20, day X, and not eating, and you have these meals. Like, I don't want to. Like, I'm sure it's unpleasant.
I can say with confidence there were several generous donations to the Pooch Cemetery that evening or early the next morning as a result of that merge feast. It was diabolical.
So coming back in the game, what do you see the lay of the land? Like you have these two original tribes and these 2 swap tribes. Where do you see things going? Are things looking original tribe strong? Are things looking swap tribe strong? Are things even more complicated than that?
Yeah, so this was the height of my panic in the game because I remember coming into the merge thinking, A, I don't really have anything on my resume. B, I've been voted out. C, I don't know who I can trust. Like, it was the dream scenario to have Shauna there because she kind of kept me emotionally anchored and not letting the panic not letting other people know how panicked I was, because I think had that been widely known, it may have not worked as well in my favor. I don't know. But I do, like, this was when I had that turning point conversation with Melissa where we went off the next morning. I knew I was near the bottom, if not like in the bottom 2 or 3 players. And I remember like we walked off like on this side a little bit where no one could hear us or see us, and production wasn't there. And I just remember ugly crying. Like I was like sobbing because I think all of the emotion had just kind of from the previous day, like battling back in, it was such a high point, and then coming back in and realizing, shit, I'm in a really terrible position here. And she was so sweet. Like she genuinely like comforted me to a point, like, and I saw this different dimension of Melissa as a character and as a player. It was really a really beautiful moment, and I'm really grateful that she was there for me in that moment when I was at a really low point. And I think it speaks a lot to her as a player and as a person that she was there for me despite just having voted me out a little bit earlier. And then she said to me, she's like, Matty, like you can win. Like she goes, back yourself. Like you've got great social connections. You may not have made big flashy moves, but that was probably the biggest turning point in my game, was that really genuine, authentic conversation I had with her.
So what are the conversations you're generally having with Carl, Tony, Melissa, and Trinica like, given they just voted you out? Are they trying to woo you back, say it's okay, like we won't vote you out again, or what's happening when you talk to them?
Yeah, that's really interesting, because I think my kind of like, I think Melissa and I when we had that conversation, she also said, look, obviously we're not, like, we acknowledge we weren't really working together at that point, but she said, how about you with your people, me with my people, we just have each other's backs and we let each other know if our name comes up. And I'm like, great, this is like a little in with me for her to work with. And we both agreed to that, and we were both loyal to that. And then, so her name wasn't out. Obviously, my name didn't come up in that first merge vote. Tony, I vaguely remember me and Tony having conversations, and Trinica and me having conversations, but I don't remember that ramping up until the second merge vote, because I think, I don't know, but they obviously probably knew that what was going to unfold at that tribal council.
You're meeting Charlie and German for the first time. These are the last two players in the game you have yet to meet. Talk to me about them.
Yeah, so interestingly, German was in my car from
okay, nice.
Nashville. So in my car German was in the front. I rode them back, which is where I wanted to ride, because I like kind of being able to observe what's going on everywhere.
Always the most legroom in the back.
Not much legroom, no, but German, it's so funny because now I get it because I know him and it's so on brand. He's like, I'm not moving from the front. And he's like significantly shorter than me. And I'm like, this guy's got some like serious like attitude, but I loved it. Like it's hilarious. And so he stayed in the front, which worked perfectly for me because I didn't want to sit in the front, because I wanted to kind of just suss out who these people were as human beings, because we couldn't talk game at that point. And I think that like it was German in the front, me in the back right, Shauna in the back middle, and Hannah in the back left. And I think and Pete was driving, so he was very kind of strict in terms of like not allowing game conversation. We weren't allowed to say our name, even where we were from, how long our flight, no details. Like it was purely just, you're in the car, you can kind of have some small talk, but nothing that would reveal anything about your game experience or your personal life or anything like that. What was the original question? I got off a bit of a tangent there, Steve.
So two of the players you're meeting for the first time at the merge are Charlie and German.
So German obviously had the car knowledge of, like we crossed paths, but not in a game setting. And then Charlie, so credit to Charlie, because he knew I was in a very vulnerable position on the night of the merge. He came up and made a really proactive effort to say, look, if you want to work together, well, this is what I recall. But he really gave me an olive branch. And I thought, I like this kid. He's really genuine. I've got a good vibe. And from that moment, I was like, look, I'll be really loyal to you. Let's stick together. I said, I'll go to the end with you if you want, because I've got, like, I really don't have any options. And that was kind of the beginning of us working together. And I'm super glad that endured in the way it did, because he absolutely deserved to make it as far as he did in the game.
And another player who you're meeting for the first time, you might have recognized from out last season too, was Hannah.
Yes, so that was an interesting one, because she was in the car as well. So I feel like we kind of knew of each other, but then in game mode, she impressed me a lot. Like the way she carries herself, the way just socially, she's a really, really astute. Is that the correct word?
Yeah.
Like she's just, honestly, her social game like blew me away. Like she was assertive enough, but she just got really great live game IQ is probably how I'd describe it. Like she was very impressive. And when I'd known that she had, I think, flipped on the OG greens at some point, I'd had that. Okay, I can't remember. But once I knew that and she wanted to work with us, I'm like, okay, I've got another in here. I've got Charlie, I've got Hannah, I've got OG, Shauna, Sandra, and Kiri from Pink. And I thought, look, I've now got some options. And I wasn't feeling quite as isolated as I was when I ugly cried to Melissa.
How was that overnight challenge, night 5?
Interesting. So that, I don't know what it was called. It might have been Up All Night, but we were placed about 30 meters away from each other. I don't know what that's in feet. Maybe multiply that by 4.
90.
A lot. It was a significant distance, and we were told, you need to stay where you are. And I remember, like, before the challenges started, I was standing there for like 15 or 20 minutes, and I was getting tired. I'm like, I just want to sit down, and we weren't allowed to sit. And I was getting, like, I could feel bugs biting me. I could hear what I thought might have been snakes or something, and I was quite close to what I think was some water. And I just thought, like they said, you've got the option of tapping out immediately if you want. And I remember the challenge started. I remember Ethan was to my right, and then Carl was immediately to my left. The challenge started. Ethan didn't move. I saw Carl and Tony, their silhouettes, walking off, and I'm like, if they're walking off, I'm walking off. Like, and then we got to where production were. There were 6 of us that immediately tapped out because I just thought it's a no-brainer. Like what's getting immunity for 1 vote when you have all of this opportunity to work within your merge tribe? And I knew, despite feeling like I was near the bottom, I think I knew my social game is my strength, and I need to be talking to people. So that was where I knew I needed to be. I wasn't even going to really I threw that intentionally.
So Ethan ends up winning this immunity challenge. In the strategizing for the rounds, talk me through this. When did you get a sense like this is kind of 2 alliances butting heads, and how did you pick which side you wanted to be on? And did Shauna have any influence on that?
Yeah, so I knew obviously things had fallen apart with the green swap tribe. So I thought I need to just put that to the side. If I make the same mistake and trust them twice, and I get voted out a second time, I wouldn't be able to live with myself. So I was really transparent with them. I said, look, I can't work with you all right at this point. I'm not closing the door. I would never close the door on a potential working relationship. But I think at that point in the game, I just said, I can't right now. Let's see how the first vote goes, and then we'll reassess. So I was obviously in with Shauna, Sandra, Kiri. Who else was with us at that point? I can't remember. Anyway.
Yeah, so it's going to end up being you, Sandra, Charlie, German, Kiri, Hannah, and Shauna, to my understanding.
Yes. And German was in on that. You mentioned German's name, yeah? Yeah. So yeah, effectively we had 7, which then became the 6 that ended up progressing through. But we thought we had that down, and we didn't even discuss a split. We thought, we've got this. There's no way Tony will know. Because we didn't say where the vote was going. And there were a couple of names discussed. And I guess based on my conversation with Melissa, the only thing she knew was that it wasn't her. Because that was the kind of arrangement we'd made about keeping each other informed if our names would come up. But I do remember hearing Shauna's name come up. And I remember Shauna's reaction, and I vaguely remember she was quite panicked by that. And rightly so, because of what transpired at that tribal.
Did Shauna still have a safety without power advantage at this point?
And I didn't know about this at this point because we didn't have enough time at Battleback to really discuss what she had in her jacket, which is where all of the things were kept, which she then bequeathed to Sandra after she got voted out. But yeah, the safety of that power may have been in the jacket, but then production were like, no, she was voted out with it. It can't continue. But I didn't know she actually had it. And it wasn't until I think right near the end where Sandra shared with me that she could have played that and she didn't. But then that would have impacted. I don't know who may have had another vote on them in that round, who would have gone home if Shauna had played it.
Sandra caught a vote.
Oh shit! Yeah, that would have not been ideal. Because it would have still we would have been in a very similar situation.
So why Tony? Why target Tony?
I think, I can't even remember. I just remember that being the general consensus from the 7 that I was working with. I think it was challenge threat, strategic threat. We knew him and Carl were tight. Or that was the perception that we had because in the early stages of the game, everyone thought someone was connected to somebody. I don't know, for whatever reason, when they connected on the Green Swap tribe, I think they played orgs together and I heard them chatting and I'm like, okay, this is dangerous. Me going into duo busting up mode again. I'm like, threat. And I knew it just had to be Tony or Carl to give us a little bit of power going forward because those as a duo would be post-merge, the biggest threats in the game by far.
So was Tony then was that the ideal person you would like to have seen gone home, or is there anyone else that you would have preferred that vote over Tony?
I think at that point, Tony, purely out of him being such a big threat, like he had great relationships with Green. He like has a calm demeanor. Like he had a good social game. Like we would have worked together had we had the opportunity, and the circumstances were different. I think that for me was like a big warning sign. I'm like, look, I may even consider working with him again. And I'm like, Matt, don't be stupid. Like you need to, like, because I think the longer he would have gone in the game, the better his position would have been. He was a very, very good player.
Shauna being idled out, I can't imagine that is on your plan for the merge. Ideally, who from your alliance would you have loved to seen idled out at that point in time instead of Shauna?
Nobody. I'm dodging the question, but no, because I just managed to get back in a position where I felt like I had people and I felt like we're in a good position after feeling like I was like a bottom feeder for like the previous 12 to 18 hours. And I don't know. I genuinely can't think of who I would have wanted to go at that point, because anyone, I don't know anyone but me, but it was shit because we just kind of flipped things a little bit, and I genuinely don't know. I'm sorry to sit on the fence, but
So in this tribal council, I guess, how confident were you walking this tribal council? Did you have to get a sense like, okay, things are split, but was it like, were you sure you had the numbers, or were you just like, I could be the minority and just not know it?
I was fairly confident because Charlie had kind of pledged his allegiance to me, and he was probably the one potential wild card that could have flipped. In addition, German and Hannah were pretty solid. And the discussions they'd had, I think, with Sandra and with Shauna, I was not as involved in this conversation for this vote, but I knew that I just felt confident kind of going in that we were all on the same page in terms of where we were voting. The big blindside was Tony coming out and revealing an idol and playing it correctly. I just remember feeling this collective fuck. Excuse my language. But it happened. I was like, no, it was the worst thing ever. But I credit to him that. And I later found out when I was actually absorbing a little bit of information in the group chat. I remember the 6 thought, or the 5 that were left out of the 6 I was working with. They thought that I may have inadvertently blabbed to Ethan that the name was Tony. And I'm like, and then I started second guessing myself. I thought, shit, did I do that? Did I say I think who we were voting for? But then Tony revealed in the group chat, he said, no, I read somebody's lips saying my name. And then I heard another player actually say it out loud. And so I'm like, okay, thank God it wasn't me.
Yeah, so at the tribal council, Tony plays an idol for himself, and then German also plays an idol for himself. There's no votes for German. However, Tony's able to negate 7 votes, and so it's 4 votes for Shauna, 1 vote for Sandra, and Shauna is voted out yet again and is the first member of the jury. What's the fallout back at camp after this?
I think I was just really sad, and I guess it really microphone.
Sorry.
Thank you. Thanks for that, Stephen.
Right. Sounds good. All right. So you're saying you were really sad after this vote?
Yeah, I was just emotional because I'm like, damn, we'd endured so much. We both got voted out. We both battled our way back in. It was the worst case scenario for my game at that point, to lose my ride or die, who I felt. And I said to her, we can go to the end together. I don't care if you beat me. It's fine. It is what it is. That's the kind of faith I'd kind of put in that relationship. But I think what it kind of presented was a situation where, okay, there were the 5 that I ultimately worked with, and there were the 5, the Akina 5. And so then I kind of was like, oh, I think it was Ethan who came up to me and he pitched. He said, what you should do is you should do this, and you should do this, 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 and this will help your game because, and look, I love Ethan, and he knows that I mean this like lovingly, but he was kind of like telling me what to do, and I'm like, don't tell me what to do. This is what I'm thinking in my head. I'm like, I was just nodding and smiling and going, okay. And he's like, he said, you should vote for German because blindsiding someone with an idol will really help your resume. I think that's what he said. So I don't know if German had played his idol at that point.
So German had played an idol at the final 12, and then he had gotten another one, the one that Kiri had found the clue for.
Yes. And so that was what Ethan was encouraging me to do. And I'm like, I don't like this. I don't like this at all. And so that really, for me, was like, I need to stick with the 5 people that did vote with me in that first vote because I was effectively the swing. And Ethan actually articulated it that way. He goes, you're the swing vote. The power is in your hands. And I'm like, I didn't realize until he said that. I'm like, the power is in my hands. I can decide who goes home. And like, this will dictate the entire path of the game. This could put me in a position to win. Like, that was when it dawned on me. I was like, holy shit, this is actually happening. And then we quietly discussed in a group of 6 who the next name was, very quietly, because we thought someone had maybe blabbed. I thought it might have been me, but we were just very discreet about where the vote was going, and we executed it. And that was, I think that solidified us as an alliance, like 2 consecutive votes.
So what was the deciding factor to have you go with the Nankana 2.0 alliance versus the Okina 2.0 alliance?
Purely the fact that they'd all voted me out.
Which I think is pretty fair. Now,
yeah, and because the thing was, socially, I'd probably have more time getting to know them as humans in the Muskie Misfits situation. So, and that was a really difficult thing that I had to grapple with in the game because I didn't really want, like, from a human element, it was hard to do, but I knew that that's what I needed to do from a game perspective because I've always lacked that killer instinct and that, like, cutthroat kind of element of my game. And I really wanted to try and do it. And thankfully, they respected that.
At that final 11 tribal council, you have this interesting moment where Tony and German both stand up and hand off things to other people. Tony hands something to Ethan. German hands what is the idol to Kiri. Did you know about those handouts that were going to happen? Was that a surprise to you at all?
The Tony one, no. Because I knew from the one-on-one conversations I had with him, I could sense he was panicking. I think he was pretty certain it was going to be him, which was good information for me to have because I knew that they weren't expecting the blind side that ended up happening. And to circle back to the Okina SWAT tribe, one of the outpost visits, they got a fake idol. And so I suspected that what Tony had passed someone was the fake idol, just to try and spook the Pink 2.0.
Why target Carl from the Okina Alliance?
I think we all knew how much of a dangerous player he was. And given we'd swung and missed with Tony in the previous vote, I recall that it was just a logical kind of switch because I think everyone was expecting votes to go on Tony again. So we just thought we need to change it up. What if there's another idol? What if plays his shot in the dark? So we needed to kind of, and given the perception that they were a duo as well.
So I guess one other question is, when German got the idol and had been Kiri's note, was there much discussion or talk around this, whether he would pass it back to her or whether he would keep the idol for himself?
That was quite the drama-fueled moment because Kiri, I remember after she'd found it, I didn't witness any of that actually happening because that was in the first merge tribal, wasn't it?
Yes.
I don't know what I was doing, but I was not observant. I didn't see it happen. But then afterwards, Kiri was crying. She was saying that German did this, and all she wanted to do, like her bucket list item, was find an idol. in a live game. And I felt really bad for her. I was like, oh no, because she had actually shown me the clue previous to that before we went to the vote. And she's like, it was kind of an extension of trust for her, from her to me. And she goes, I haven't showed anyone this. I'm like, all good. I'm like, you can trust me because like I don't have anyone else to work with. And it was this like these 3 sticks, and it looked a bit like the Blair Witch Project, that stick thing that was tied together with sticks tied together with rope. But it was the TP. It was the top of the TP. And I'm like, I thought it was in a different location. But after she showed me, she was obviously very sad. German was like emerging as this like villain, and I didn't even know that he'd wrestled an advantage from Melanie earlier in the game. But yeah, that it was pretty spicy, and Kiri was pretty upset. But then, yeah, I think it was very emotional. I'm like, okay, this is good for my game because there's a lot of other shit happening in the, like in all of our view, which will hopefully help me disappear into the mix, which was what I was trying to do at that point, especially after Shauna had gone 2 votes earlier.
So Carl's voted out is a narrow vote, 6-5. This leads you to the next challenge. You have the Tell Me the Story challenge that Melissa ends up winning. Anything you want to talk about with this challenge?
I tuned out after about 1 minute of the story.
You're just like, I'm okay not winning.
No, well, like I had a strategy. So we were allowed to, if we saw someone else open a box and the token was in there, we could effectively just follow them. So I thought, okay, I don't need to actually know the answers. I just need to follow someone to each of the stations. And so you see the footage at the start of that challenge. I actually even just stopped and I'm like looking, and I chose to go to the station where at least 2 people were going, because I thought if there were 3 options, one person got it wrong, second person got it wrong, I was going to get it right. And then at least I'd be off on my way. And then interestingly, when I went back and watched that footage, Melissa had gone off on her own, and then she ultimately ends up winning by like, I think 10, 15 seconds, and I was coming in second. And yes, she earned that because she obviously knew the answers and yeah, did really well, and she was immune for that round. And that obviously wasn't great for our alliance, but really, really great for her.
Was she the ideal next target for your alliance?
I don't think so. I think it still would have been Tony, purely out of just his presence. There was something about him. He had this like very, I don't know. I think, as I said earlier in the game, my perception was he was this alpha male. But yeah, he was proving to be strong. He had, I think he'd obviously had the correct idol play. So he had big ticket items in his resume. Actually, Melissa had a correct idol play at that point as well. So but the consensus seemed to be Tony was the logical vote.
Now, when you're in a majority of 6, there's a minority of 4. I mean, granted, you've only had 1 successful vote. How much in your mind, like, I guess 2 questions. First, have you found someone who's replaced Shauna for you as being like your ride or die?
Yeah, so I think Charlie had emerged as someone who I'd only known for this very short period of time, but I felt like I could trust him. Like, we'd voted together twice. Sandra, obviously, because she was part of my original Pink game, a lot had happened in that time point after when I was swapped. But she'd obviously given me the scroll, so I knew Sandra was very, very loyal, and I felt very, very safe with her, and I knew she was good with Kiri and therefore with German as well. But I think Melissa spooked me a little bit because she was saying, I think there was a moment where she flagged that Hannah, German, and Sandra all knew each other outside of the game.
All of them played Outlast at different times.
I'm sorry?
All of them had played Outlast from 2 different seasons.
Yes, and it helped spike my paranoia a little bit. And so I was always kind of a bit wary of the 3 of them together, even though I didn't have to be. But yeah, so to answer your question, after Shauna went, I felt comfortable with Charlie. I felt really comfortable with Sandra. And I kind of felt Hannah and German were as close as they were. But then Kiri was kind of this really interesting, complex kind of floater that had navigated her way through. She'd flipped on Shauna in Pink, the Pink Spot tribe. And so Kiri was really kind of starting to emerge as a big player. And I think just assessing my options, I was like, okay, Kiri's a big threat. German's probably a big threat as well. Hannah obviously had flipped from green to us. So it worked well in my favor to keep all of those players around because they were the flashier players compared to what I'd done up until that point, and probably for the duration of the entire game.
So at the next tribal council, Tony is voted out in a 4-2-2. Both Ethan and Tony both play shots in the dark unsuccessfully. I can see Tony playing it because he was the target. I can see Ethan playing it because he just won 2 straight immunity challenges. Like, oh no, I'm now vulnerable. They might go for me. But Tony ultimately goes home. This leads us to the last round of the day. This is kind of the tile smash challenge. How is this for you?
What was the challenge? Sorry, Stephen.
I feel like this is the one where you're on the platform, you're like lobbing little balls and trying to smash these tiles. It goes on for a while.
Yeah, Kiri won this one. And
Yes.
so we were obviously, that was a great outcome. It went on for a while. There was some, uneventful, really. But very eventful for Kiri because another item for her was to win an individual immunity and she hadn't. So that was a nice moment for her.
Yeah. So at this point, in your alliance of 6, there's a minority of 3. It's the final 9. On your head, are you kind of looking like, I feel comfortable enough going to the final 6 with my 6? Or you kind of say, at what point there's Trinica and Ethan, minority, and Melissa, and all people I have a rapport with, what point do I need to use them to winnow down my own alliance?
The thought hadn't really crossed my mind, and I think it was because I think after Shauna went home, we voted together in that first vote. We voted even though we were incorrect, we voted together successfully in the second vote. And then again in the third vote. I just felt we were gaining some momentum and we all gelled. We were all there were 3 pinks, three OG pinks, 3 OG greens, 3 male identifying players, 3 female identifying players. I'm like, this can work. And we all were just very aligned based off of a large number of things. I think strategic intent worked for all of us. Kind of getting through the merge, it worked for all of us. And I think for my game, it didn't work leaning into, I think I was really spooked at how well Trinica had me really comfortable when I got sent home. Like that for me, I was just like, wow, she's a top tier player. That she made me feel that comfortable. And I think that something inside me was just like, I can't entertain that at that point in the game.
Was there a point where you started discussing within your alliance kind of the positioning of like, all right, we're going to the 6. This is happening. Let's talk about what happens then.
We were just focused on getting to the final 6. That was it. And we basically made a collective agreement. If we get there, if we're lucky enough to get there, let's just have it out, however it transpires. That was that, and my understanding is that was genuinely how it went for most of us. I think there were some final 3 deals happening all the way through. I was pitching to everyone. I just said, I'll be in any combination. It doesn't matter. I really just want to get to the end and have a go at pitching. Because that was my previous trauma of having 0 votes in a final tribal council. I just wanted to have that opportunity again. And I was really open about that. I said, look, I got 0 votes the first time I played. I just want another crack at doing that.
So at the next tribal council, it ends up being a 3-3-1-1 vote. 3 votes Melissa, 3 votes Ethan, 1 vote Hannah, 1 vote German. You are a vote for Melissa. In the revote, Melissa also loses her shot in the dark. In the revote, Melissa goes home 7-0. Anything to talk about this tribal council?
I'd completely forgotten Melissa voted for me, but I love, after watching her intro video, how she talked about wanting to be the rogue vote queen. And
I don't think she ever did she?
Did she? What, sorry?
I don't think she ever cast a rogue vote, did she?
That one she voted.
She put her shot in the dark.
Oh, I think you said she voted for me.
No, I because you catch votes at the Hannah when
was the final
the tribal
six.
council where Hannah goes home. I want to say.
Yeah, Hannah and German voted for me in that.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Melissa vote, I think it was a 3. What was it? 3-3.
3-3-1-1.
And then I think it was unanimous after that, because I think people understood how much of a big game threat she was, and it sucked having to vote that way, especially after we had kind of bonded at Green 2.0. But unfortunately, that's the game.
So we're end of day 6. We've kind of wrapped up the first full day of merge voting. There's 8 players remaining. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling positive and optimistic at this point, because I'm like, look, I felt in a fairly safe position. I think the alliance it's definitely the strongest alliance I've ever worked in a game.
Mm-hmm.
It just consistently proved vote by vote by vote. And I felt like we were just getting stronger each vote that we endured together, which was really nice.
Talk to me about the dynamics of this alliance.
So it felt very strangely neutral, is how I felt. Like, obviously there were the bigger threats that I perceived, like Hannah had a big game, Kiri had a big game. German, although he didn't, from what I recall, accurately play his idols, I felt comfortable with him on a personal level, but I felt which I later found out, he had done a lot of things before we got together at the merge. And yeah, so those were the 3 that were probably at the top of my threat radar.
So can you rank the players in the game at this point, the final 8, from most to least important for your game?
Well, okay, most important, least important. Okay, I'll just go down. Sandra, Charlie, Kiri, Hannah, German, Trinica, Ethan.
So Ethan because so we're gonna move on to because had you and Ethan made a formal promise, we're just not gonna write each other's name down? Was that something you two had made with each other in the game?
I don't recall that being the case. And I think because without spoiling too much, the game we had played together in Sydney, I kind of fell on my sword for him. And so I was really determined not to have that replay in this game, especially when we'd suffered through everything we'd suffered through. And he was playing his own game, I was playing my own game. And I really wanted to differentiate my game from his as much as possible. And I didn't want people to think a pre-existing relationship would factor in to how the end game transpired. And therefore, that's probably why I would rank him where I ranked him for that exercise.
Because day 7, you have a memory relay race as the next challenge, which Charlie wins. Anything you want to talk about with this challenge?
Oh my god, yeah. So I have a terrible memory, and bolted out of the gates, rolled under that thing, and got to the blocks. I read the wrong side, and then I didn't realize it was a couple of other people had done it as well. And I remember having a really good formula of how I was going to work with, because my memory's bad. So I was like, okay, remember the first letter of every object. And I think there was a snake and a skull. So those were the 2 that could potentially be interchangeable. And so I remember memorizing it, running back, and it was really hot at this point, Stephen. It was high 90s, I think, in Fahrenheit, or mid to high 30s in Celsius. It was awful. And just having to run back for that first time, not much fun. But look, I think that's where Charlie's memory ability really shone through. He's a very, very smart player, and I probably should have clocked that sooner, but I didn't. And yeah, I felt a bit defeated because I felt like that was probably a challenge I could have won. had I listened to the instructions correctly.
So the reason why I was talking about, your relationship with Ethan, because like the two of you never vote each other, even when you're voted out, even when he's voted out, somehow neither of you write your names down, because at this tribal council it ends up being a 4-2-1. Trinica plays her shot in the dark. You vote for Trinica. It ends up being 4 votes Ethan, 2 votes Trinica, 1 vote Sandra.
So this was not the plan. So the plan for this vote was a 3-3 split on Trinica and Ethan.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if Trinica played her shot in the dark,
mm-hmm.
the plan was on the revote to take out Ethan.
Mm-hmm.
But if Trinica did not play her shot in the dark, which meant she was more dangerous in the next round, we were going to take her out on the revote. And then the vote happens, and I'm like, what the heck? Like 4 votes on Ethan? Who changed the plan? And this is when I started getting paranoid again, because I was asking, and then Sandra goes, oh my God, it was me. I was supposed to vote Trinica. I accidentally voted Ethan. I'm like, really? I don't know if I believe you. And I think I watched the confessional back after that, and I was really paranoid because I'm like, I think she did that intentionally. And that's a great move, because then she's starting to take ownership over the outcome of what ends up transpiring. And but it was a genuine error, yeah.
Should she have done what Charlie did, where you claim it was a mistake and say, no, that was all on purpose. I voted that way on purpose.
No, but it would have been iconic had she really claimed it. But I think it was a genuine error, because I remember saying to her, oh, that's okay. We got one of the 2 outcomes that we were going for. And I said, look, you can always add it to your resume and claim it as something that you did. But then I don't think she did, from memory, in the end.
No, she did not when I was going back to the final.
But that would have been, potentially really good thing for her to claim, because I didn't know. None of us knew.
Had you ever had a Survivor auction before?
Yes, in the unrecorded game I played. Okay. It was the very first thing we did.
Okay, well, you get to have your own Reelfoot auction coming up next at the final 7. This auction, my favorite part of this auction is watching all the food Trinica can't eat, because she has too much of it.
Oh, I felt so bad for Trinica in this moment, because I think I remember whispering to Sandra, who's next to me, I said, or Kiri maybe, I said, keep eyes on whatever she's eating to see if she pulls out a scroll, because I was convinced there was going to be an advantage in some of the food. And we all knew how many fire tokens she had. I think in previous tribals, the sack of fire tokens that I think Melissa had passed on to Ethan and Trinica, which were then ultimately came down to Trinica. I think she had 23 fire tokens or something. It was insane.
How many fire tokens did you have going into this challenge?
I had the 8 from Battleback plus the 1 we were all given at the auction, so I had 9. And so my strategy was wait it out. Nobody knows that I've got 9. Everyone thinks, and I'm sitting there holding the 1 that I had publicly. I'm just and letting items go past, people successfully bid for some things with 1 token. I'm like, no, I need to wait for Trinica's tokens to dwindle down to a point where I can outbid her. Otherwise, I'm not even going to try.
And she buys a lot of things, and she often even watching the video, I had no idea how much she had left, nor how much you had. So it was surprising that you were finally with the advantage, because at the very end, it's nope, it's mine.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because at that point, hunger wasn't really impacting me, because I remember after the merge feast, I woke up the next morning feeling really hungry. And I think it's just because my stomach was oh my God, food again. Food, and then you feel awful the next day, even if you, and so that's why I thought, I'm not going to bid on anything big, because I don't want to feel worse later that night or the next day. And I was okay with hunger and how everything else was going at that time. And I thought, look, if I get nothing, I get nothing. And then I didn't know whether the fire tokens were still going to factor later in the game, but I'd rather have held on to those than potentially be outbid when it was so obvious how many tokens Trinica had.
So you end up buying a challenge advantage. And granted, we'll talk about the chat. You don't end up using it, but having that could have been the difference between winning and losing. Because your next challenge is The challenge that you think is going to be a balance challenge, but really is an endurance challenge, is you're holding a rather heavy paddle while balancing a ball on it. I've done this challenge. You're like, I play tennis. I'm like, oh, it's easy. Then you're like, oh no, I can't hold my arm straight like this because I am so exhausted and it's shaking too much.
That's so cool. I play tennis as well. That's interesting. Same height.
Well, I was so excited, like, oh man, my years of tennis have trade off, because you do this in tennis where you balance balls on your racket while holding it out, and like, oh, it's perfect. And your racket typically isn't 5 pounds.
Yeah, and oh my god, yeah. To your point, it was so hard. Like, and I didn't know this because not listening to challenge instructions yet again. I don't know if I missed it or whether it wasn't explained, but everyone had their elbow on their body to start. Mine was like out here or like out. And they go, okay, we're going to transition to the next phase where your elbow doesn't have to be on your body. And I'm like, looking at myself, I'm like, my elbow's not on my body. I've just been doing it harder than everyone for like 15 minutes. I was really annoyed at myself. And so, yeah, that was phase 2, was taking the elbow off. And then phase 3 was obviously the stretched arm, which was hell. And thank goodness. Like, I remember saying to the 6 Alliance, I'm like, we need to push through this, because as long as one of us wins, then we all make final 6 happy days. And look, credit to Trinica, because she left everything out there, and there's no way I would have lasted the duration that I did if it wasn't for her pushing me. And I said that to her afterwards. Like, it was a really more muted celebration when I got through that challenge than previous ones, because I knew she was feeling it. I knew that was her game, and it would have been heartbreaking. And yeah, it sucked for her.
Well, so I feel it's around this round or maybe the previous one, your alliance formally gets a name.
The Breakfast Club.
Had you seen the movie?
No, I had not.
Okay. Have you seen the movie since then?
Sorry, what was that?
Have you seen the movie since playing the game?
No, but we've shared the poster, and so I kind of get the gist of what's going on. But I need to watch it. That's my homework tomorrow.
What was Trinica's fate sealed outside of her winning immunity? Was there anything that she could have done or anything that could have changed to have her not be voted out?
Look, it's Trinica, and she was like one of the most elite players I think I've ever played with or against in all of the live games I played. And anything could have happened. Like, we didn't know if she had an advantage. We didn't know. Like, I think Ethan faked that he found a scroll in the Melissa vote when she went, and I'm like, we don't know. Like, nothing's certain. But yeah, we could have done a split, but we didn't want to cannibalize our alliance before we had to. So we just thought, we'll go all in. If we get, like, if she plays an idol, whichever one she chooses to take out, they go home.
Did you know Kiri was going to play her shot in the dark?
Yes, because she said it was the last time she could, and that was another bucket list item. I just love how she was just going through her bucket list items. It was actually so entertaining to be there and be part of that. And then she's safe, but she didn't even need to play it. It was just great. She had such a fun, like, post-merge game. I love being part of it.
So this is where things are going to get challenging, because you have now successfully voted out all the minority. Your alliance of 6 has gotten to the final 6, and now you need to actually turn on one of your own. And you mentioned before, like, you hadn't really had discussions about that. The mentality is like, hey, we'll deal with it when we get there. And so you are there. I don't know what the challenge was this round. I know Kiri wins it. Would she have been an option at this point?
Potentially, but I think I remember the name being presented to me by Sandra and Kiri was Hannah. And Kiri, I feel like Kiri and Sandra definitely spear. Yeah, it's Reelfoot trivia. That was the round. And I'm very, very sorry to past Reelfoot players. I was not disrespecting anyone by being really terrible at this challenge. It was just because, like, that book that with all of the trivia, I'd only studied.
The one challenge I want to be in someday. I'll be really good at it, and for some strange reason.
Oh my gosh. Like, yeah, because I think we each picked a season that we're going to memorize because we thought it was going to be a group tribe challenge. And so I only memorized season 7. So
The best season. I think, yeah, because that was Thick as Thieves, right? The Blood versus Water season.
Jimmy was the winner?
Yeah, that was my season.
Oh, no way. Oh, God. So I wanted to do so much research about Reelfoot, but I couldn't find the footage anywhere. I could only find the first couple of seasons on YouTube.
Yeah, so because the first couple seasons are on YouTube, and then editing stuff happened, and so then they started live streaming season 5 and onwards. So you had to like dig through the Facebook footage to see seasons 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11.
Okay. Well, that will give me some more fun viewing because I feel like I know season 7 fairly intimately after studying that.
If you want links, reach out to me after this, and there's a wiki page at least. So
amazing, yeah. Because in Melanie's interview, I remember she'd reached out to you for links and did some very, very smart game prep. She was a lot smarter than I was.
Yeah. So then at that point, like over my head, that like I never even thought she'd be on the season. So that was cool to see.
Yeah, no, good on her. Like seriously, preparation pays off.
So talk to me about the strategy for this round of who you're working with, who you're going to target, how this alliance is going to have to finally eat its own.
So at this point, I definitely felt strongest. It purely came down to gut instinct and who I felt most comfortable with and that I could trust. And Sandra and Charlie and Kiri, I think were the 3 that I really felt that I could have a realistic path kind of going forward, purely out of feeling like I knew them the best and I knew Hannah and German the least in terms of time working together, having strategic conversations. And it was a bummer, but I remember that particular tribal was a like absolute scramble. And this is where my short game in Sydney came very much in handy because like I remember the tribe I was on, we lost, went to tribal, lost, went to tribal, lost, went to tribal. We had 15 minutes to strategize at best. So it was like short, sharp, fast. And that was exactly what happened when the memory thing happened, like the challenge ended. Kiri won.
Microphone. Microphone.
Oh, bloody hell. I always want to get excited. Is that better?
Yes, much better. All right, please continue.
Apologies for anyone watching this on a rewatch at home. Yeah, but that quick, when we knew the challenge had ended, we had 10 or 15 minutes to figure out who we were going to vote for. I remember lip reading Kiri and she was like, Matty P. And I'm like, oh no. And so I spoke to every person individually. It was like the craziest scramble. And I was lucky to come on relatively unscathed with only 2 votes from Hannah and German, which said to me, I can trust Kiri, I can trust Charlie, and I can absolutely trust Sandra. And I said to Sandra, that was the vote that solidified my absolute trust in her after the Ethan vote when that didn't go. Like, because I remember looking at Sandra's eyes and she's like, I've got you. You'll be okay. Because I was panicking. I thought, this is it. I'm going to finish 6th again. It was, yeah. It was an unfortunate outcome. But it was kind of exciting to be in the game, to be like, we really were just all 6 of us really scrambling hard. And I think every single person had their name at that trial, like, scratch out.
So how much when these votes are you thinking like, you know, we're final 3 and like, can I sit next to and beat Hannah at the end? Is that factoring into your decision to target Hannah over, let's say, German?
Yeah, I think we collectively realized, or within the 4 that I was then kind of envisioning myself going forward with, that none of us could beat Hannah at the end. Like, I think we were like, no, she's got this in the bag if she gets to the end. And that was probably the biggest driver in that decision.
It's the end of day 7. It's your last night in the game. How are you feeling?
I remember it being a bit sad because we were hoping that all 6 of us would get to spend that night at camp. And I remember German being quite emotional. Like it was nice that we all made the final five together, but it would have been sweeter if the six of us had got to spend that night at camp. But look, from a game perspective, I felt positive. But look, nothing's guaranteed. And I think I had a healthy level of paranoia from the moment I was voted. I never felt fully comfortable at any point because, if I did, I was spooked that I was going to go home again.
Looking at the final five, were there players that you wanted to take them with you and players you didn't want to take them with you? Or like you said, you're just like, I'll sit with anyone?
I genuinely felt that because I thought, look, I was absolutely willing and open to go with anyone to the end, but it just gelled in the way that it probably needed to for me in the end, because I think what we all understood at probably 6 were the 3 biggest threats. And that was just based off of the moves they've made, their resumes, like their ability to speak really clearly and coherent, like, and just sell an idea at tribal council. Like Kiri really blew me away with how well she spoke, like with confidence, with, I couldn't see myself beating Kiri. And then I think Sandra may have floated.
Something else I missed out in the final 6 is I forgot that Kiri's idol expired at final 6 and she plays it for German too.
Yeah, I didn't really understand what was happening there. She may have shared it post-game, the rationale, but I think it was, I don't know, it could have been a strategy to take a bit of the heat off of her in terms of how great of a game she actually was playing. Like, I think she maybe wanted to do a misfire, and maybe that's why she played a shot in the dark as well on reflection, because maybe she wanted to seem like she was just trying things and they weren't being played correctly. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah.
That's the conclusion.
So your final 5 immunity challenge in day 8 is unique because no one wins.
Oh God, yeah. That the description in the YouTube video is on point. What was it?
Pointless?
Pointless, yeah. Oh my God. And that was the worst because I got eaten alive by whatever bugs were out in that water. This is why I didn't go in the water. Like, yeah. I think, there were several of us that realized that within the rules, we were allowed to be in a seated position. And so we just sat and got baked in the sun and eaten alive by bugs for nothing. Broke Reelfoot, like created Reelfoot history for all the wrong reasons.
Well, on the bright side, yes, no one's won and you're all exposed, but also because there's no idols left, there's no advantages, there's nothing at play, not even individual immunity. So everyone's name is on the table this round.
Yeah, so that's quite a unique situation. Has that happened in Real Survivor?
I think they've always awarded immunity. Even like I'm thinking Survivor, 43 or so, where they had that last gasp challenge and like it was Carla and someone else just endured it. And Jeff's like, we're going to give you both immunity because like, what else can we do at this point?
Oh my gosh, I'd forgotten about that. Yeah, it was interesting because I think it was fair game at that point. That was a really nice spot to be in, knowing that there weren't going to be any surprises at Tribal. And I think that was a really hard moment for me because I hadn't really had to lie to somebody's face until Kiri came up to me and she's like, there's no way it's me, is it? And I just remember going, heck no. Just like really poorly lied. And I think it was a genuine blindside at that Tribal Council.
So I guess first off, why not Charlie? Because German and Kiri both vote Charlie that round. Why not vote out Charlie at this point?
I was enjoying the loyalty that we shared in our game. And it's coming back to me now. I vaguely recall we did say, let's take each other to the end. And I really wanted to stay loyal to that. And it just would have been, I think, a poor strategic decision on my end to send him home when I knew he was going to be loyal to me to the final 3. And if I had blindsided him, I don't know how he would have reacted as a juror. Like, he may or may not have respected that. Whereas Kiri respected that. She told me that the reason why she voted for me was because I managed to lie well to her face.
And so why vote Kiri out over, let's say, German, right? Especially because German had just written your name down at the prior tribal council.
That was a tough one. I think Kiri had emerged at Final Five as the biggest threat. I think none of us, like, realistically, I think we collectively, from what I recall, agreed that she was probably going to win if she makes it to the end. And given she'd won that previous immunity, the memory one plus the smash one, she was just potentially one more away from equaling the Reelfoot record. And potentially she could have gone on a tear and won a couple in a row. Like everyone, I feel like, was a similar-ish challenge threat at that point. Like I felt like we'd all, like, the big challenge threats have been neutralized and it was a pretty fair game. But yeah, I think it was purely out of threat level. She was, I think from a jury perspective, I remember looking and going, will they respect Kiri's game? And I thought they all will. Like everyone who's sitting on the jury would respect what she's done. And she hasn't really burnt anyone. She played a big game, and if she got to the end, she would have deserved to have won.
So Kiri goes out 3-2, and this leads you to your final immunity challenge. It's kind of a bit of a multi-stage challenge ending with a snake puzzle. How is this for you?
Awful. So this is the one where we had to toss sandbags onto something. The other three had all qualified. I'm still sitting there trying to toss them, and then someone from Prod comes up and says, "You realize, like, you're out." And I'm like, I didn't realize that. Should have listened to the instructions again, but I wasn't. And I flopped. And I wander up to the end watching everyone doing the snake puzzle. And that was when I think Charlie really emerged as a big puzzle / memory threat as well. He was on that, and deservingly won.
And so, German, having voted in the minority the last tribal council, was he? Hold on, I messed something up here. So German's voted in the minority of the past two tribal councils, and so did he know his neck was on the line? Like, this is it for me. Like, if I don't win, I'm out.
I think he realized he was in trouble. I also realized I was in a lot of trouble because I think I knew he was going to pitch my name, and I was absolutely going to pitch his name because I think in the threat kind of hierarchy, he was.
It's the two of you.
If he got to the end, he would have, he had a very, very, very good case to win, and it was an awful pre-tribal thing because it was emotional. That was a hard, really, really hard vote, but we both knew we had to go for each other, and that's what we did.
So German goes out in a 3-1 vote, and the last order of business before final tribal council, there is a reward challenge to give a juror an extra vote. How is this challenge for you?
Initially, it was extremely disappointing because I could see 2 members of Prod walking up with the box, and we're like, "Oh my god, we're going to get fed! This is food, amazing!" I think at this point, I'd eaten a mandarin a small mandarin for the previous 24 hours, and I knew I said earlier hunger wasn't really a factor. It was starting to become a factor because we were down to 3 people. We weren't talking about much. We all knew we had to start thinking about our pitches, and nothing would have made me feel more whole than even just half a sandwich at that point. And they come over and they're like, "Here's another challenge," and we're just like, "Oh no!" And it was a puzzle. It was the Decennium logo, which I haven't touched on this earlier. Iconic, my favorite Survivor logo ever. It's I think Stan designed.
You might be biased.
I might be biased. No, it's just, I love it. Purple's my favorite color. It's I love the symmetry of the wolves and then the hawk and then the snake, which ended up being foreshadowing. It just, I love it. So that was the puzzle. Charlie comes first, unsurprisingly. I wasn't too far behind. And then I think there was a moment where they said, "Oh, there are too many pieces." So I thought I was closer than I think I actually was. But Charlie deservingly wins the advantage, and then we weren't sure how that was going to play out, whether it was going to be spoken about before we did our pitches or afterwards. And yeah, that was stressful because we all knew we needed to work on our pitch.
Yeah.
We had almost no time. We were hungry, we were hot. It was hell.
So going in the final tribal council, what was your read on the jury?
I feel like the Muskie Misfits experience may have worked in my favor in terms of, like, I didn't blindside really, I guess the Calvo was a blindside, but I think he knew I wasn't working with him at that point.
Yeah.
And I didn't do anything too abrasive. I felt I wasn't quite sure about Kiri and Hannah, and I knew German was obviously really upset. So, but I think the greens from Akina, I wasn't like, I felt quietly confident that was going to work out with at least 4 votes.
So
but not sure.
Were you feeling like it was going to be equally split between the 3 of you, or do you feel like one of Sandra or Charlie was going to be your bigger competition going into the final travel?
I felt it was going to be pretty even split between the 3 of us. Like, I thought it could have been how many were there? 9 on the jury. Well, with the double, like the vote multiplier, could have been 4-3-3. I really don't know. I think and what I came to understand after our final pitches was we all did play quite different games. And I think the biggest player that I probably underestimated, despite working with her for almost the whole game, was Sandra, because she played a really, really great game. And I've got to give her props. Like, she was outstanding all the way through. Like, I remember just reflecting on her first day at Tribal. She was pretty outspoken. Like, Carl was quite loud and James was quite, like, taking on that leadership figure. But I remember, and what I loved about Sandra is she spoke her mind and she just was unapologetic about it. And I love that. And I think she did really incredibly well to get all the way to the end. Like, I think, and it was surprising that people didn't clock her as a threat. Like, I'm surprised that Kiri, Hannah, and or German didn't try to go for her before she got them out.
Yeah, that's definitely something I'm going to ask them, given what we know and how the game went down. It's like, for you, Charlie, and Sandra, or especially for you, you are very correct to say, I am good in the 6 because I feel confident I can navigate and be on top of this. For the other 3, it's like, should they have taken a shot earlier to clear the way in their path to get to the end? And that'll be something that'll come out in later interviews, I'm sure.
Yeah, I can't wait to watch the others.
So going through final tribal council, I don't feel like there was any. I don't know if there's any question. Is there any question you'd like to discuss or bring back up based off what the jury threw at you?
No, I felt fairly comfortable answering all of the jury questions. I think it was just the one thing. And look, I was very fortunate. I got to go third. So I got to hear both Charlie and Sandra's opening statement before I went. And I remember just saying to myself, like as I was exhausted at this, but like, this is where everything really did start to take a toll on. Nerves started coming through, and I wasn't really clear at the start of my pitch. But I remember inside of my head, I'm like, Matty, keep going. Just own it. Like, just talk with confidence, try not to pause. And I remember talking something about, like, my social and strategic game, and then I talked about physical limitations. And I'm like, hang on, I won, like, my way back into the game of Battleback, and I won the paddle challenge. Like, it makes no sense. But thankfully, because I just kept going, no one really questioned me on that. It made no sense at all, and I did not mean for that to come out of my mouth, but I just ran with it.
Well, it was interesting. I think when you pitch your game my game is a game of 2 halves. And like, it's like, everyone has a pre-merge, post-merge, but for you, it's very defined by that. It's like pre-merge redemption, then post-merge, and making that happen. I'm curious, like, so what do you think stood out more for what do you think led the jury to vote for you over your competitors at the end?
I think I think the way I described the journey and the way that it was, I did have the fortune of having those two clearly defined halves. And I had the pre-merge experience, which ended up with me getting voted out. And then I came back in with a very clear vision of what I had to do differently. And that was to vote against the Okina players that had voted me out. And I think for me, it became more clear each vote post-merge that that's exactly what I needed to do. And I'm thinking, damn, if I can get every one of the Okina people out, and then German had voted for me and Hannah had voted for me, I can claim that every single person that voted for me in this game is on the jury. And I think that was probably my strongest point.
Yeah.
In the end. But I'm open to feedback and I'm keen to hear your thoughts. Like what like having watched it.
I mean, so like I will admit, I don't like final tribal councils. I find them hard to sit through and digest. I just given that I think players oftentimes have a difficulty articulating their own game. And I think jurors oftentimes it's a moment where you have to like really like say they're juror, you matter a lot, and really like make them, because you're trying to make them feel good about them losing so they make you win. It's this very weird scenario. And I think my takeaways was that it seemed like, and maybe this was very Trinica defined, that Sandra was pegged more of like, hey, you really focused so hard in the six that us in the minority felt very like we didn't know you or excluded. And then Charlie, people may have said, hey, we feel like you played emotional, not strategic. I feel like those were some of the criticisms levied at your competitors. And even coming back from what Justin said earlier, no one really faults you or brings up or says anything about you were voted out and came back in. And anything, you're able to kind of pitch this, hey, this is a strength to my game. Look what I was able to accomplish and differentiate myself as a result of my competitors. And like you said, packaging it saying like, my goal was to vote out you all, and I was able to vote out you all. I think that was all helpful for you.
Yeah, I think that definitely is probably what sealed it, was being able to articulate that. And I think that the misperception with me playing was probably that a lot of the players post-merge didn't think I was being like, I have no doubt that almost everyone thought I was a GOAT. And that's what I wanted people to think, because I wanted people to feel comfortable with me being at the bottom of any final three combination, just so that, because I knew, like, I think it became apparent after Trinica went home. I'm like, I've dispatched of the Okina 5. No one's clocked it. None of my six alliance had recognized that that's what I'd managed to achieve. And like, I feel like it worked out perfectly because I was still able to manage like and downplay how much of a threat I may have been if I made it to the end. And yeah, I was happy with how things worked out, obviously.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So one of the challenges, like there's this kind of recurring question we see in LRGs now, is like players rate, like close your eyes and we're going to say the jury name and you're going to raise your hand if you think you have their votes. And I think you raise your hand on 2 votes, Shauna, which makes sense, and Melissa. And those are the only 2 votes I think you're like, because it's this weird game of like, I don't want to tick off someone by being overly confident. I have you, but I also want to raise my hand never. And people say, well, he doesn't believe in himself. You have the question from Hannah saying, who do you think led the votes? It was kind of a messy trying to record who everyone was saying names like that. But yeah, it'll be interesting when I talk to the jurors to kind of get more of a sense of how they're voting for. I think probably the person that surprised me the most was you getting Tony's vote, because Tony comes in with he is a leading question to Charlie that's kind of setting up Charlie to say, hey, this is a chance to really show off your game right here. It makes you sense like, oh shoot, Tony's like really pulling for Charlie, which I think why Charlie gives Tony that vote doubler because of that jury question. And
look, credit to Charlie for like taking the shot, because he was like, look, we'd gone through this journey together. Obviously there was a bit of friction at tribal, and I really respect Charlie for doing that. And unfortunately it didn't work out for him in terms of the final vote, but I think it was a really bold decision. And like as a juror,
Mhm.
I would have respected that a lot.
Mhm.
Like it was ballsy, and he had everything to lose, and he didn't go with a safe option. Like he could have gone with German,
Yeah.
which would have got him 2 votes, because despite German having that question around him acknowledging the fact that I was able to turn 2 of his allies against him,
Yeah. No,
I thought I would have had German's vote, but I didn't.
German had
He
a
voted-
very complimentary final statement to you at that final 6.
Yeah, and it gave me this false sense of like, oh, maybe I've got his vote. And then, yeah, speaking to everyone afterwards, I was like, oh, interesting. And then, yeah, and as like I thought I had Shauna's vote, but obviously she saw how great of a game Sandra had played,
Yeah.
and Sandra absolutely earned her vote. And I think that Shauna was probably one of the few players alongside me who realized how well Sandra played.
So walking out of Final Tribal Council, how were you feeling? How confident were you?
7 out of 10, I think. Like I thought I stayed
Literally 7 out of 10 votes.
Oh yeah. No, it's interesting, but like I was quietly confident,
Mhm.
but anything could have happened. And I knew that the jury were going to vote for gameplay, and I'm like, did I do enough to
Mhm.
make them feel like I'm worthy of their vote? And I really didn't know. And like Kiri, I had no idea. Hannah, I had no idea.
Mhm.
The Okina group, I was a little bit more certain with, except for Tony. And then having that vote multiplier, I was uncertain as to whether he would go, okay, I'm just going to go with Charlie because he put in his faith in me to, like, I really had no idea. I like, from all the information I'd put forward, I was content
Mhm.
with whatever result ended up happening, because my goal coming into the game was to be able to pitch and articulate the game I played. I felt like I did that. Even if the votes didn't go my way, I was going to be happy, because at that point I achieved what I wanted to achieve.
So how surprised were you with the vote reveal?
I was very surprised, because the jury did we were not supposed to mingle with the jury, so we were like told, I think the jury were told, don't talk to the players, like don't reveal anything. They did such a good job of not revealing anything. I was like, oh no, I've screwed this. Like I haven't won. And then my energy just dropped, because I was like, I think we just had something to eat, and they wanted everyone to get fed before they read out the votes. And it was quite late at this point. I think it was like 10:15. And we did Final Trouble like 7-ish, I think. And so I had no emotion left in me. And I'm a really emotional player and emotional person. And when they read out the votes, I'm like, is this actually happening? Like I felt like every tear I'd left in the game, except for the Final Trouble, I was just like, I had nothing left. And it was pure shock. Like I'm like, how many votes do I need? And then when it was going the way it was, I was just like, no. Like, because I genuinely thought Sandra and Charlie were going to get more.
So, having been crowned the victor of Surviving Reelfoot the Decennium, how was the posts? How was the post game, the party, and everything?
It was like, honestly, that final vote readout was really truly special. I'll never forget that for the rest of my life. Like the last couple of hours in that night were just unlike anything I've experienced before. But it's weird, because we went from the game into this like finale party situation, and I almost felt a bit overwhelmed. Like I think there were points where I was like in the corner by myself, and then I had a joke with Trinica. I'm like, how are you feeling right now? And she goes, I think she said something like, lots of people everywhere. And I'm like, do you want to go sit in the corner by ourselves? And she's like, yep. And I was like, it was just an assault on the senses to go from being in the game with no phone, no noise, like levels really, and just being in game mode for 8 straight days to then being thrust into, and I didn't feel equipped to be able to be socializing at that point. It was a really bizarre experience. Like it was amazing, but me, Charlie, and Sandra were just gassed as well. Like we were collective.
Oh yeah,
tell that running on fumes, and I think that's like, and it was a very different experience to like, yes, I've only played day games before, but the bonding you have with other players, whether you go pre-merge or if you're on the jury, I think the bonds you make, or what I've observed and what I've experienced when I've sat in the jury before, is it's different to making the end, is the only way I could probably describe it. Because like it was incredible, but at the same time it was you could see how close the Okina 5 were, and like it was beautiful to see, because I think, and like people like Debbie who stayed around the entire game, like everyone had bonded in their own little way and made the most out of their experience, which I was super, super happy with. Selfishly, I just wish it could have kept going for another day, just so I had the opportunity to be social, genuinely social with everyone, especially Sandra and Charlie, because they went on the same journey with me, and they were both super, super tired, and Sandra had to leave and Charlie had to leave really early the next day. I didn't leave quite as early, but it's very different.
Did you directly fly back to Australia the next day?
No, thankfully that was the original plan, but I ended up extending it out until the Wednesday. And just by chance, the previous night I was chatting to Kiri, and she was like, "Oh, I'm going to be in Nashville." I'm like, "Oh, can I get the same car as you?" And then so we ended up sharing a car with, oh my gosh, I'm drawing a blank. I actually can't remember who drove us. I didn't know, but I know who, Josh. Oh my God, please don't hate me. I think it was Josh. It's almost 1 a.m. here.
Don't worry, we're only going another 5 hours, so then you can.
Look, I can go without sleep. This is fine.
Reelfoot's trained you.
So I ended up hanging out with Kiri and German the next night for a little bit, and then caught up with Kiri a bit the next day, and that was really nice to just kind of decompress coming out of the game. But I went home on the Wednesday, which was like 10 minutes apart from when Kiri's flight went back to Canada. It was really, really wild how that transpired.
What has Christy Bennett's evaluation of your gameplay been?
She was really proud, I think, because obviously I didn't make it a secret. We knew each other from, well, like the players didn't know, but we knew each other from playing Sydney together. Ethan knows her as well, like as in knows her as well as I do. And I think she was someone who I just tapped into as a friend and as a resource, like for this game, because she did 55 days, which is just, I can't even fathom. And I asked her post game, like, so did you get like a rainproof jacket like we did? And she's like, no. Again, she said it rained almost every night. And I'm like, we almost broke after one night, and you lasted in Samoa for almost 2 months. And it's so, yeah, she was proud that I was able to execute what I wanted to execute. And like that meant a lot. Like, I think she was the person who rang me when I finished the game, and she is, very, very special person, a dear friend. And it was fun to be able to take on a lot of the feedback I'd asked her for over the many, many months prior to the game, and to be able to apply it. It just came together during Reelfoot, and it wasn't gelling until I got in the game, and then it just came together, which was really.
It just
really
took
cool.
coming to North America.
Seriously, you're so lucky over there. Like, I hope everyone understands how lucky you are to have so many options in terms of games. Like, not just Survivor. Like, you've got the Mole, you've got other things like Big Brother, like what Debbie played. It's so cool, and I think Australia will get there. It's just a matter of like seeing examples like this where you can have a really long game with, honestly, and the crew. Oh my God, Stephen, like, you've played it. You know how awesome the crew are. They prepared us so bloody well with like the manual, like that I read ad nauseum before. I was like, what can I pack? How can I plan this? Like, I was just in that mindset for 6 months, and they gave us so much good information. I read all of it. They really looked after us. Like, I think in a player, like, we had a group chat with the core four production crew, I was asking them so many ridiculous questions. I was sure they were going to get annoyed with me before the game, but nothing was too much. And in terms of delivering an amazing player experience, they did that tenfold for everyone. It was honestly, such a privilege. And Pete in particular, he really went above and beyond with me as an international player, and like just really looked after a lot of the players in the game as well. Like I know the game is the game, and sometimes issues come up and you need to speak to someone from production, and incredible. Like small crew, but they describe themselves as small and mighty. They were beyond mighty. It was next level what they were able to achieve with such a small group.
So I know it's very late your time. Is there anything about your game that you want to get to that we haven't had a chance to talk about yet?
Let me have a quick look. I did make some notes. I did want to highlight how terribly I voted pre-merge. I voted incorrectly 75% of the time. I voted incorrectly. It was a lot.
You only voted out James.
Oh my God, yeah. Oh, I'm sorry, James. Do you remember something funny from the night when we were all just sitting after the lightning storm? I remember it was Debbie and Shauna's birthday because we realized it was definitely after midnight. And I remember we're sitting there, everyone's miserable. And I just said, happy fucking birthday. I don't think they were very happy. But it was just like little moments like that, the human moments in the game were just incredible. And that's what I'll take away from this experience. That's worth more than any placing in the game or anything like that. It's just, I feel like I've intersected. That's the beauty of live games, and anyone who hasn't played one absolutely needs to.
So what I like to do at the very end is give some rapid fire questions. And so the first one I have for you is, who surprised you the most out there?
Kiri, because she was really quiet at the start, became a big player. German, I didn't realize how much of a villain he was. And Trinica, like she's a very complete player. Like she's all three of them knocked my socks off in a good way.
Who do you wish you had a chance to work with but didn't?
I would love to work with Danny and Melanie. Like I'm devastated that our paths didn't really cross. And even Jo, like she was so fun. Like all three of those would have been amazing.
Reelfoot is having a returning season. You can select one player from your season that's not yourself to come back and play again. Who would you pick?
Trinica.
Well, Trinica would agree with that. Coming from Austin Jackson, would you ever play a Winners at War style season?
Look, I would never say never. Like this drained my emotional tank, but I would absolutely consider it if I was invited.
What was your favorite challenge?
The plank. I think that was, sorry for everyone I had to watch. It was really boring even going back and watching the footage, but just the visceral emotional reaction I had afterwards was absolutely how I felt on the inside.
What's a favorite camp life moment that maybe we haven't talked about?
Oh my goodness. There was a lot of talk about flatulence and gastrointestinal issues. Destigmatize bowel health is all I'm going to say.
Stephen Fishback would approve this. What was I going to ask? If you could go back in time to give yourself one piece of advice before the season began, what would it be?
Learn to make fire and practice shitting on the ground before you get into a game. Sorry, I'm so sorry. Actually, this is Matty P.
So next time you go camping, don't use an outhouse, don't use a real bathroom. Go rough it and figure it out.
You have no idea how badly I was cramping as a result of trying to suppress the urge, and it was just making it worse. And the whole first day, I was in the biggest panic because of that. Yes, poop emoji is what's on the Merge Tribe flag, and it was there for a reason for me.
At Final Four, say you're voted out, and your final three is German, Sandra, and Charlie. Do you know who you would have voted for?
It would have depended on their pitches.
Okay.
Like, I think I'm a really, it's hard. I'm an emotional voter, but like I felt emotionally closest with Sandra, but I wouldn't have wanted that bias to, like, I coming into this game, I really wanted to vote for gameplay and who deserved to be there. And I think everyone deserves to have a pitch, regardless of where my bias might be before that. So it could have gone to anyone.
What do you feel like besides, winning and everything that comes with winning and the title and the crown, what do you think you take away from your experience at Reelfoot?
I think there's so much. And in the cast assessment, this is something I really wanted to touch on, and I'm glad you nudged me and reminded me. I think Trevor spoke about how in the game on day one, I was really panicked and I almost didn't play. I almost pulled out in the weeks/months leading up to it because I'm like, I'm not going to be able to do this. I'm not going to be able to deal with the elements. I was catastrophizing, and my therapist here in Australia encouraged me to play. He's like, Matt, you absolutely need to do this because you love Survivor, you love people. It'll help you overcome all of your fears and like things in my head. And I didn't realize how right he was until day one in the game. And Trevor did reference that. He's like, it's almost therapeutic for Matty seeing him out there. And it was like, I've never put myself in as much of an uncomfortable situation in my entire life as I did during those 8 days. And it's completely rewired my brain. I didn't think at the age of 40 you could change yourself that much, and it's just made me want to do that in every other aspect of my life moving forward. And that's the kind of stuff money can't buy. And like I was so fearful of being uncomfortable. So yeah, that's the real victory for me.
Do you think we'll see you in the United States for another game someday in the future?
Initially, after the game, hell no. I was going to say hell no, but now thinking about it, I'm
Give it a year.
And especially because I feel like Americans really respect game, and returnees are like as big of an issue as they are here. And I think I don't know. I feel like as a winner, like it was interesting to see how people worked with Sandra and Shauna and Melanie, who I didn't know was a winner. I'm like, look, I would want to, and like placing doesn't matter to me. Like I want to go in and have a different experience. Like that's what I would like to do. But if I'm cast, that's the biggest challenge, is getting cast. And nobody's here, but in the US as well. So I'd be open to it for sure if the circumstances are right. But I'll need to save a significant amount of money because I absolutely blew my budget in this trip. Well, I'm renting and I'll never own a property, like because of decisions like this. But they're worth it. Life's short. So.
Well, Matty, I know it's late your time. I just want to say thank you so much for doing this with me. My morning, your evening. This has been a lot of fun. Thank you for helping unpack and explain your game.
Thank you so much for hosting, Stephen, and for persevering through the tech issues as well. I've had so much fun, and to have over 3.5 hours, almost 3.5 hours of your time is big. What you do for the community is not lost on me, even as a newbie into the American live game scene. Thank you for what you do, and I can't wait to watch the rest of the interviews and hear other players' perspectives. It'd be great.
This has been a ton of fun. So next up, I think this Sunday evening will be James, and then I'm working to get Shauna scheduled as well, and we'll slowly work our way through the Okina 5. That is probably my game plan.
I commend your endurance. I think you're the real endurance king. The fact that you were doing, I think, Daddy, less than 12 hours. Really?
Yes, it's been 5 hours podcasting in 12 hours. But what's up the love?
Look, no, thank you so much, and big shout out to everyone back home who supported me, especially my non-Survivor friends, Kareen, Beck, and Rani. I love you all so much, and you watched all of this raw footage that you weren't interested in, but thank you. It meant the world to me.
Yeah. Thank you all for tuning in. This is just one of many yet to come Surviving Reelfoot deep dive interviews. Again, James, Joshana upcoming. The formal events will be scheduled soon. So everyone take care. Have a good day. Or the hat is out. There we go. The hat has made it out just the end. And have a good rest of your day, everyone.
Before and after. Thank you.